Welcome to Tales from SYL Ranch Live, where everyone is entitled to my opinion, and I'm Bill Stone. And tonight on Tales from SYL Ranch, we will of course have live viewer call-ins via Skype anytime that you want. We will do the weekly Lancaster County, Nebraska virus statistics where I live. We will talk a bit about the Coney Barrett confirmation hearings. We will break it up a little bit with a review of Star Trek Discovery Season 3, Episode 1, That Hope Is You. We will talk about some unspecified emails to and from some unspecified individuals, and maybe even an update a bit on Civil War II. Now, this is a live stream, so even if I'm not able to get to you via Skype, you can always chat with me about anything that you want to in chat. And we can see here already, we got J. Marshall Presnell. Hey, how's it going? 5x5. Always love to hear that. You can, in chat or on the phone, talk to me about anything that you want. It can be anything. Political, social, the virus whose name I can't mention without YouTube deranking my videos and channel even lower. U.S. Civil War II, or even things related to science fiction, fantasy, horror, superheroes, and other related genres. I'm happy to answer each and every question in as much detail and as truthfully as I can. There are some personal subjects that I won't discuss, but pretty much anything else is fair game. I'll get to as many viewers as I can, with the understanding that I don't really want the stream to run more than about 3 hours, because I'm an old man and I have a little lower back arthritis, and I've got underneath me now maybe a pillow that'll help a little bit, but it tends to take it out of me longer than about 3 hours. Now, if you'd like to be on the show, I am going to do that via Skype, but since I don't want to give out my Skype information in public, I want to do it this way. If you're interested in being on the show, send me an email at callin@sylranch.tv. Give me your Skype information, and I will Skype you back. And then you'll be free to talk to me about anything that you want. You can agree, you can disagree, whatever you want to talk about. So again, if you're interested in being on the show, send me an email to callin@sylranch.tv. Give me your Skype information, and I will Skype you back. That email address again is callin@sylranch.tv. So I got 2 or 3 viewers here, one of whom is me for monitoring purposes. Let me put this here into. I took it off. Take off my everything but notifications. Let's see. Marshall says, and you're sitting in Lindsey Graham's chair, by the way. Yes, as a matter of fact, I am. Totally accidental. I just wanted a picture of this Senate hearing room that was empty, because if there's people in it, they're like frozen, and it doesn't look that good. I tend to prefer things that don't have people in it. Hey, Bill, nice to see you. Haven't seen you in here before. For those who may not know, Bill and Marshall are very, very old friends of mine that I know roughly from the same place. Although in Bill's case, I have met him once in person, albeit briefly. Always meant to tell you sorry about that, Bill. I was stuck with relatives and things were very weird. I would have liked to have spent more time with you. Hopefully someday when if that theater opens back up, we can arrange something. I'll let you know that our good friends over at Star Trek Continues, Vic Mignogna, has told me outright that if we can get that theater to show the final 2 episodes of Star Trek Continues, he'll make a personal appearance. Keep that in mind. So, the answer to the question that no one has asked: what are the weekly virus statistics in Lancaster County, Nebraska, where I live? Well, I always source this to a specific website. You can find it down below. It's a great website, very interactive. I think it's way better than most states have. My only suggestion is that you change the default from showing the last 14 days to total number of deaths, because that's actually a lot more informative. So, if we look at our weekly statistics, the population of Lancaster County remains roughly the same at about 319,090. Our total tests this week are up to 84,693, which is up about 1,000 from last week. However, as was pointed out last week by Marshall, these tests do not necessarily mean there's individuals who are being tested. This doesn't represent the numbers of individuals tested, because a single COVID patient will then be tested multiple times. And so no matter how many times they're tested, that still adds to your count. So that's not entirely descriptive of something. The total number of Lancaster County positive tests is 7,655, which is up from last week, but that probably corresponds to the increased number of tests. Total deaths in Lancaster County remains static for the last 3 weeks at 26. Deaths as a percentage of the total tested is 0.0307%. Deaths as a percentage of positive cases is 0.339%, and deaths as a percentage of total population is 0.00815%. The deaths as a percentage of positive cases went down last week, but again, we had more positive cases, same number of deaths. The same thing went down slightly for the population because, again, same number of deaths. It didn't matter. It's the same. Let's see. Bill Hedrick and Marshall are talking about FidoNet. Yes, Marshall, going to be talking a little bit FidoNet as we go along, oddly enough, or at least sort of. Marshall says, I wonder what the stats are in my county. Did I miss my cue? Well, that's the stats in my county. Utterly negligible. Irrelevant. Not worth having destroyed our local economy over. So it looks like I have a few viewers, so I'm going to talk about the Amy Coney Barrett hearings. Man, where do you even start? I hate these things. I just hate them. I don't have any prepared remarks on this. I'm just talk about it because it's so easy. I hate these things. I hate them. Not that they have confirmation hearings, and not just the fact that every time a Republican nominates someone, it gets, truly, truly crazy. You can look back in history. There was first Judge Bork, who quit because it got too crazy. Then there was Clarence Thomas. If you weren't around for his, lucky for you. There have been others in between. Oh, man, the last one, Kavanaugh, complete nonsense from beginning to end. Everybody involved in that could either not remember any details, or they were just outright lying and recanted later on, and nobody found out about that part. And now we have Amy Coney Barrett. Oh, God. The things that they've started to do to try to get her, right? I actually saw somebody on Twitter, a supposed lawyer and a potential judge, who complained that she wasn't wearing a business suit. She was dressed nicely in a dress. That was too much for that particular snowflake. I watched them sit there and whine about her religion as if the concept of religion being a major factor hadn't been settled back in the Kennedy administration. Nobody remembers, and I wasn't even alive. But during when President Kennedy was a candidate, everybody worried that since he was a Catholic, he was going to start putting Catholic stuff into government, and he didn't. And they never do. It's not an issue. Forget it. It was just stupid, inane, question after stupid, inane question, and they do the same things that they do every single time. It turns into, every time they have a public hearing of any kind, it doesn't matter what it is, it turns into just a bunch of people making speeches. They give them 5 minutes apiece. They'll sit and yammer on for a while. Maybe there'll be a question in there somewhere. And then their 5 minutes is over and they don't give the witness a chance to actually answer. I didn't watch this whole thing. I didn't need to. What's the point? It's just a bunch of grandstanding morons. What I did see of it, I only saw one senator asking her any pertinent information. In terms of how she had decided similar court things or what, that sort of thing. Most of the time they're saying stuff like, oh, well, are you going to overturn Roe v. Wade, blah, 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 and asking her hypotheticals. Well, any good attorney will tell you the right thing. It's the same thing I would say. I say, well, I would have to, right now the lower courts are handling that. If it comes up, I'll take a look at the details of any particular thing and, rule on the basis of that. That's all you can say. That really is all you can say. You can't say, yes, I'll definitely do this, or, yeah, no, I definitely won't do that. You have to say, well, I will look at every case on its merits. Now, she does seem to be something of a constitutional originalist, which I like to see. But I would have felt so much better if I were hear people say things like, What is your stance on the Fourth Amendment versus, say, everything that the NSA does? This is all Fourth Amendment stuff that is just an abject violation of the Fourth Amendment. I'd love to see somebody ask her questions like that, ask her questions about specific things, and nobody did. It was just the usual, I'm going to have a speech, I'm going to have a speech. Oh, my time's up. You don't get a chance to answer. Ha ha. Oh, it's so useless and annoying. It just makes you want to slit your wrists after a while. Watching it, I had to watch some of it so I could be at least marginally informed. But again, what I saw was the usual crap every time they have televised public hearings. Yammer, 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 speech, 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 no question of any consequence, blah, blah, blah. Oh, and there was that one woman whose name I forget from Hawaii, who asked her if she had ever sexually assaulted someone, or words to this effect. I'm like, sorry, hon, you're off on the wrong guy. That was the last one. That was the last nominee. There really is no reason that this Coney Barrett shouldn't be sent up and sent up to the Supreme Court. I can't think of a good one. Why not? One of the things that I was impressed by was that she was clearly the smartest one in the room. She did not have an interest in having all of these, blah, 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 yada, 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 speech things and not getting anywhere. When asked questions, she was clearly the smartest person in the room. And of course, we had that, rather famous moment when somebody asked her what the notes she was putting on or held up a blank piece of paper. There's a meme waiting to happen, and I've seen a number of them now. Looking over at my chat here. Marcia says, Law Babe, a friend of mine mentioned, actually liked it. She's also one of the few women anyway, on the, I can't speak to men, but one of the few women on the, who would be on the Supreme Court that you would say, it's a pretty attractive woman. If you're my age, you're much younger than me, she's probably too old for you, but she's still, for me, an attractive woman. And you can't assail anything like her faith, her big family, and all that. She has adopted kids. She has a kid with special needs, and yet she's still able to get all this done. I think she's clearly, qualified to be on the Supreme Court. I just wish that they would ask her questions that would be a little more pertinent. How do you feel about the NSA constantly spying on everyone 24/7? And the Fourth Amendment. Where would you come down on something like that? Suppose you had a case come to you where somebody was challenging the fact that they're sending all this data out to Utah. What would you do then? I don't know that she'd been able to give an answer specifically, but it would be interesting to find out what her, opinions on the Fourth Amendment are. It's a big deal. Marcel says, tech note, there's a weird color tinge in neck and head area. Let me see if I can cause that to stop by moving a little bit closer to my... It's a weird color tinge. Is it looking any better now? I know it. I have it had occasionally flash, where my camera is attempting to do something in terms of making up for the fact that it's auto correcting. So let me know if that changes. Only on your key, the background is static. Yeah, that makes sense. That's what I'm seeing sometimes. Sometimes moving forward like I have will cause it to stop. I kind of like sitting backwards so you can see the entirety of my bolo tie, and I maybe don't look quite so fat. But if moving forward takes that away, I'm happy to do it. Bill Hedrick says, the thing is, these are glory hounds, not lawmakers. Yes, they are, as I always like to point out, power-mad, sociopathic narcissists in the textbook definition of that sense. You can look it up. Antisocial personality disorder, which is sociopathy, and narcissistic personality disorder. Look at the symptoms. You will see enough of them apply that they clearly suffer from a combination of the two. Power mad, sociopathic narcissists, every single one of them. Yeah. Bill Hedrick says, she took the bait, less than a dead walleye. Yeah, she didn't take much bait. There really wasn't anything really for her to say. There wasn't much for her to say. It was the usual stuff where they whine on and on, blah, 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 speech. Oh, Kamala Harris, Jesus. I just wanted to punch Kamala Harris in the face, like repeatedly. You know, she was saying she'd ask questions over Skype, and she wouldn't give any chance for anybody, any possibility of having any kind of an actual answer. You know, it was just, yeah. You're running for vice president, but damn, I want to punch you in the face right about now. Looks like it's trying to auto-white balance. It might be doing that. You do let me know if it keeps happening. I'm unclear there's anything I can do about it on an actual live stream like this. But do let me know if it keeps happening. As I say, sometimes moving closer into the camera will help that. So, but that's my take on it. It's just such a giant waste of fracking time. Yeah, I can see it doing it still. Let me try pushing back farther away and see if that looks like it got worse. It's probably the color of the shirt I'm wearing, to be honest. It's probably auto-adjusting for that. Well, I'm going to have to cope. But it's not serious. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. This is always something I worry about because, you know, people are going to watch this later on demand. And I don't want to be off-put by the fact that it's trying to counterbalance. Yeah, that's what's happening. It's trying to balance for my white shirt. Okay, note to self, next time it's going to be the dark-colored shirt. I prefer the white because of the way it looks. But if it's going to sit here and try to auto-adjust for white, I don't want to do that. Maybe I can get in there and tell it to stop doing that. Okay, that's pretty much all I had to say about Amy Coney Barrett. It's a giant waste of time. Don't waste yours by watching it. All you'll see is people making speeches to their constituencies. I'm not even sure that these things should be public. I'm not sure that they should ever be public. I think maybe they should just be totally behind closed doors, because then at least you don't have this tendency for them to just give speeches. You know, especially people like Kamala Harris, who is giving speeches because she's running for vice president, or president, as the case may turn out to be with Biden. Let's see. Amy Klobuchar representing Minnesota, typically embarrassingly. Well, if you can find somebody who isn't embarrassing, let me know. I have yet to find someone who isn't kind of embarrassing. I guess, what was it, Ben Sass? I think he was on that committee. He's from Nebraska. I think he was one of the few people that I heard actually ask questions that were pertinent to the law in some way, and not just these open-ended, you're going to destroy Roe v. Wade, you're going to take away Obamacare. Listen, guys, if you're, of a liberal mindset and are watching me, Roe v. Wade, and for that matter, the Republicans, Roe v. Wade will never, ever, 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 ever be overturned. There is now, since I was a child, there is now decades of legal precedent based on that. And when legal precedent gets made and you overthrow something like that, overturns something like that, it becomes a huge problem in the courts, because the courts rely on precedents. Both attorneys and judges make decisions. I mean, attorneys will craft their arguments a lot of times based on what are the precedents? What are the precedents in the law? Yeah, it's auto-balancing. What are the precedents in the law? What can I find in the law books that says, okay, well, we had a similar case like this, and this is how it was decided. So if I argue this, I'm likely to get the same outcome. And judges do the same thing. They look and say, okay, what are some decisions that are similar to this one? And that will guide them on what they're going to do. Well, you've had decades upon decades, 2, 3 generations, maybe more now, of legal precedent. It's never going to go away. It's just not. Get over it. It's never going away. Never, ever, ever going away. Same deal with Obamacare. It was, 2010 or so, I've forgotten, when that monstrosity was passed. And while it's obviously unconstitutional by any sane reading of that document, it's there. There is now precedence. There is about 10 years worth of precedence. And when you get precedence, that means that changing it is going to throw all kinds of stuff into total disarray. So it's not going to go away. We might all want it to go away, but it's not going to go away. So whenever they try to get you all scared about, oh, Roe v. Wade's going to go away. Or if you're a Republican, if they try to get you hyped, oh, finally we're going to have a majority of the court, it'll go away. No, it won't. No, they rule a lot on what precedence is and how badly it will screw up already running legal precedents or prior cases that relied on that precedence. It's never going away. Deal. It's just never going to go away. Bill says even if it could, it would throw it back to the states, which, and I estimate a minimum of 45 would make abortion legal. I don't know how many, but certainly there'd be a number of them. And to be honest, I don't mind. My feeling is when you have 50 different states doing something 50 different ways, maybe you're going to come up with one that does it in a way that works. And, you know, if you're in a state, like Georgia, for example, they've had some pretty draconian laws. If you're in a state that has a pretty draconian law about abortion and you're really against that, you can always vote with your feet and go to another state. When the entire country has it just one way, there's nowhere to go except maybe to cross the border to Mexico for a quickie abortion or whatever. But in any case, when you have 50 different states doing, 50 different things, or, half of them doing one thing, half of them doing another, you at least have the option to vote with your feet, or we may discover that out of those 50 states, somebody is doing it right, and maybe other states ought to be adopting that. But yeah, it isn't going to be overturned. Roe v. Wade will never ever be overturned, and anybody that ever tells you that is either trying to scare you, or they are trying to get you enthused about this person. Never going to happen. Never going away. Never, ever, ever. It is there forever. If you couldn't get it done in the, I don't know, when did Roe v. Wade come up? Yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible. It was a terrible ruling. Very, very bad ruling. It was legislating from the bench. The Supreme Court had no constitutional authority to do what they did. They should have just said, this is a state issue, throw it out, send it back down to the states. But they didn't, and they sort of, created that whole 3-trimester thing, and when it's okay and when it's not okay. They created that from the bench. That is supposed to be something that's supposed to be done by legislators, not by people who are on the bench. That's activist judges, which we've pretty much had nothing but activist judges since I've been alive. Having someone who is originalist on the court, the more of those as possible, be a good thing in my opinion. But I don't think, even when they say they're originalists, I don't think they really are. Because an originalist like me, someone who would be probably called a classical liberal, although that word's been taken away from us, so we call ourselves libertarians. We look at the Constitution not as a living document, because it's not. It is the government's handbook. It is the rule book for the government. It says what the government can and cannot do. It's just like having a company rule book. You violate the company's rules, you're out. Well, in this case, you violate the government rules, and it doesn't matter anymore. So it just doesn't matter. Marshall says, statistically, the odds for finding the right policy is 50 times better than doing a federal policy. Yeah. If you've got 50 different states doing their 50 different things, you may find, hey, here's one that works, and some of the other states may adopt it. And with abortion, maybe some it'll just be outright illegal, some of it will. This is not like, the 1950s, where if a woman got pregnant and it was, really scandalous and she had to go out of state for an abortion or something like that. It was a giant, this isn't a problem much anymore. You want to go out of state, well, unless it's a really big state. Even if it is a big state, what are you looking at? 10 hours drive tops? It's not like it used to be. It's not like it used to be at all. If you want to get an abortion and you're in a state that doesn't allow it, drive outside that state. There will be lots and lots of other ones. And to be perfectly honest on that whole issue of abortion, it's not a federal matter in the same way that murder is not a federal matter. There's no federal laws on murder. Those are left to the states to make. And it's the same reason, there's no federal laws on arson or robbery or stuff like that. Those are all state issues. The only time it becomes a more federal issue is if stuff crosses state lines and the FBI becomes involved. But in general, if you kill someone in your state, it doesn't go to the federal place for it. It's a state law. And the same thing is true of abortion. There is no language in the Constitution that talks about abortion. And if you think there weren't abortions in 1776, you would be gravely mistaken. There were. It wasn't exactly anything that you'd consider a real operation. It was hazardous to the woman as well. But there were those. There was also euthanization that nobody talks about very much because, 200 years ago, if you had a baby that was born significantly birth defected, and there was absolutely, this is a time when your infant mortality rate is like 90%, and there was absolutely no way that baby was ever going to survive. A doctor who delivered the baby might just euthanize it and say that it was stillborn or something like that. That happened. So there are nothing in the Constitution that talks about that. So as somebody who is an actual originalist, I'd have to say, well, that's a matter left for the states of the people under the 10th Amendment. But very few of them actually are. Very, very few. Even the ones who are on the right tend to be not as strict originalist as I would be. Put me on that court, Marshall says, hell, Deb and you flew to Oklahoma because the medical system here where you are simply would not talk to her because we needed to pay cash. Turned out cheaper even with the trip costs. Yes. Different states are going to do it differently, and you're going to find with 50 states, somebody's going to be doing it right. Somebody will be doing it right. But it's a bad idea to put it at the federal level. Let me see if I've got it, because I always like to show this picture when I can. Static background, horror background. I've got all kinds of stuff. American subcultures. Let's take away my chat. There are at least a dozen subcultures in the United States that are broken down not by things like sexual orientation. I'm sorry, sexual orientation is some kind of racist thing now, or homophobic. I didn't know that until Amy Coney Barrett. I thought that was what you were supposed to call it. But hey, these words change all the time, and it's impossible to keep up with them. But anyhow, these are not based on things like race, sexual preference, etc. These are based largely on economic and geographic breakdowns. Now, I show this one up here, and you'll notice at the top that it says this is a map of professional wrestling territories of Canada and the United States. Now, this would have been, this map here, I guess, would be about circa 1975 to 1980, before WWE was a thing. And what they would do was 1954, I believe, a bunch of pro wrestling promoters got together and they formed the National Wrestling Alliance. And the National Wrestling Alliance was made up of all of these different individual geographic places that you can see here. And what they did was they made a deal. They said, okay, you can be a member of our National Wrestling Alliance. You get your own little territory. And if anybody else tries to come in and compete against you, all the rest of these territories are, we will send in our best guys to come in there and drive the competition out. We'll send our best talent, our biggest draws in there to drive them out. The only thing was that all of these territories had to recognize an individual champion, world champion. That was a world champion over all of these. And that champion would travel between territory to territory and meet up with that territory's top guys, and it would always be, it was in what they call the kayfabe era, when they pretended the match outcomes weren't predetermined. And so that champion would just travel back and forth between all these various places, and if things like was going bad in one particular territory, they might call them up and call up the people who manage them and say, hey, can you send this guy down to Texas? We're having a tough time getting a draw here, and we know that this champion will get a draw. So, the reason that these are broken down the way they are is because each of these different territories had a different way of marketing the product. Now, I grew up in this purple area, Nebraska and South Dakota here, this purple area that was part of the American Wrestling Association, which eventually broke off from the AEW and from the National Wrestling Alliance. But at the time, it was a member of that. And when you lived in a territory, the only wrestling that you ever saw was that territory's wrestlers. If you took a trip and you went somewhere else, you would see other territories' wrestlers, and yours would never even be mentioned. Rarely were they ever mentioned unless, one of them got hired from one territory to another. And they marketed their product differently. I've now watched, one of my guilty pleasures is old school professional wrestling from the kayfabe era. And what I discovered was, for example, up in the AWA here, the way that product was marketed was, it was owned by a guy named Vern Gagne. And Vern marketed his product by talking to viewers about any given wrestler's, if he had an amateur background. Some of them actually did. A couple of his guys actually had competed in the Olympics. Vern Gagne himself was an alternate in the 1948 Olympics. So he would push, legitimate wrestling backgrounds. He would push other titles that these people may have held even in other territories. So he pushed this as a very technical wrestling. I mean, it was a kind of looked a little bit like real wrestling does, amateur wrestling. And he would push it in that way. It was a little more realistic. Now, I've now watched a number of different territories, and in particular, Memphis always impresses me because Memphis was totally different. The people that you saw there were a lot more, I guess you could sort of say, cartoon character type wrestlers, kind of like WWE has become, cartoon character wrestlers. But if you took Nashville's way of selling that product and brought it up to the AWA, they would be laughed out of the arena. They would be laughed out. They would not be able to sell. Similarly, and I've seen it, if you took somebody from the AWA and took them down to Memphis, if you didn't adjust the way that you sold it, that guy would get laughed out of the arena. And they were two separate types of cultures that required two different types of marketing. And that's why you see all these different colors. These are different places that required different marketing in order to sell their product because their cultures were different. So there are at least a dozen subcultures in the United States. Let me get back to my previous, let's see, we're past the Lancaster County stuff. So there are at least that many different subcultures with that many different economic issues going on within them. And so if you make a federal law with that many subcultures, it's an absolute foregone conclusion that you will not be able to be fair to everyone. You will have some people that benefit and a whole bunch of people that don't. And that's why you should do things as locally as possible, preferably within your own town, your county, your state if necessary, but certainly never at the federal level. And that's what the Constitution says. The Constitution lays out a very, very small number of powers that are enumerated to the federal government. Most of it basically just says, we're going to make sure that nobody taxes things, goods and services traveling between the states, and if there's a war, we will provide a united front. And that's about all. How it does it, the specifics are, sometimes up to Congress to set. Excuse me. Sometimes up for Congress to set, but they're not supposed to have that much power. And my feeling is, frankly, if we actually still had a constitutional republic, which we haven't had any time in my life, if we still had a constitutional republic, there would be very little reason for people in Washington to get very corrupt because they wouldn't have that much power. Now, it doesn't mean that lobbyists and stuff wouldn't go around to the states. When you got to pay all these lobbyists to go around 50 different states, it gets a lot more difficult. Laws should be as close to you as possible, if there are to be any laws at all. Marshall is saying sexual preference is the offensive term. Yes, as of yesterday, according to Merriam-Webster at least. They changed the definition yesterday. Yeah. Bill Hedrick, you know Vern Gagne, of course, because the American Wrestling Association was based out of Minneapolis. Have you ever seen the 1974 movie, The Wrestler? I will, after I'm done, you can look it up on YouTube. There's a copy. It's in the wrong aspect ratio, but watch that film. Oh my God. I sent a Blu-ray copy of that to my friends at Red Letter Media for use on their program Best of the Worst, which is where they take bad movies, watch them, and then decide which is the best of the worst. That is a very interesting movie. It's back in the kayfabe era, when they pretended that match outcomes weren't predetermined. And it has a lot of wrestlers that either were big at the time or would go on to become big. There's a very, very young, brown-haired, much bulkier Ric Flair in there if you watch really closely. But there were other wrestlers, Dusty Rhodes, Jim Murdoch, I've forgotten his first name, the Crusher, the Bruiser, they're all in this. And it stars Ed Asner. He was on hiatus during the Mary Tyler Moore Show when he shot it. Not only is it treating, wrestling as if it's a real sport that's not predetermined, there's a subplot involving gangsters wanting to fix wrestling matches. And, of course, the star of the whole thing, who played the heavyweight champion of this fictional wrestling thing, was Verne Gagne himself. It is the most amazing piece of ego stroking for Verne Gagne that you've ever seen in your life. And it's really funny. At the tail end of it, there's this big thing, I won't spoil it for you. The tail end of it doesn't end the way that you think it would. Let's put it that way. The tail end, the very end, the last few frames of this thing are what make it good fodder for Red Letter Media's Best of the Worst. It's a bad movie, but it's really interesting to watch if you're familiar with, it's not just AWA. Verne actually got promoters from all over the country to show up in Las Vegas for a scene. You see Vince McMahon Sr., you see Jim Crockett and all of these people from all over the country. It's just a giant ego project for Verne Gagne, and it's a fascinating movie to watch. You can find it. It'll look like 1974, The Wrestler. It'll be like the only thing that comes up on YouTube, but I'll find the link and I'll put it below when I'm done. It's real interesting, particularly if you grew up in the AWA territory like we did. But Hedrick says the brilliance of the founders, they realized that it was a union of individual states. Oh, and you watched The Wrestler last month, man. Isn't that ending, right? That ending? I mean, I won't spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen it, but that ending? What ending? I mean, it's just like, wow. Again, it's not in the correct aspect ratio on YouTube, but it's a fascinating thing to watch, particularly if you know that the guy who's playing the champion is Verne Gagne himself. He bankrolled it. It is his thing. So it's a kick. It's just a kick. So I guess that's all I really have to say about Amy Coney Barrett and her confirmation hearings. Very, very, very pointless waste of time, a complete exercise in futility, and hard to watch. I didn't watch all of it. What was the point? I've seen a million of these hearings. Every single time that they're public is just senators or congressmen flapping their jaws, making speeches about something or other for 5 whole minutes. They're full time, and if there's a question in there, they don't give the witness a chance to answer it, even if the question is legitimate, which very rarely is it. Again, anytime they were asking her stuff, she would be like, the right answer. I don't know. I'd have to see the details of the case. I'd have to know what the facts of a given case are. Something's happening right now in a lower court. I'm not going to talk about that. That's for this lower court to decide. If it comes up, then I will look at the facts of the case and see what it looks like. That's the right answer. You don't just say, you don't go for a confirmation hearing and somebody says, you're going to overturn Roe v. Wade, say no or yes. You overturn Roe v. Wade, they say, well, if something like that comes up, I will look at it on its merits. But Roe v. Wade's never going away, and Obamacare is never going away. There is now too much legal precedent. And to take them away would shatter a whole bunch of legal precedent. Some 50 years old. And That's not going to happen. They will always defer to that legal precedent rather than throw the legal system into a certain level of chaos. So that's Amy Coney Barrett. Now, I'm going to switch over, break up a couple of actual serious things here that some of my viewers come to watch. Always say, my content slips back and forth between politics and a little bit of science fiction. You can't, unfortunately, do science fiction anymore without getting into politics, because if you like or don't like something, it turns into politics real quick. And that's what's about to happen when I talk about my review for Star Trek Discovery, Season 3, Episode 1. Now I'm going to do something real quick here. So it sounds like I'm sounding good. Last week when I hit this card, I suddenly got bad audio. Sounds like it's doing okay now. So I'm going to have a little review of that episode that dropped today. When we last saw Mikey Spock and the crew of the USS Discovery, they had needlessly gone forward in time about 1,000 years. If you remember the end of that episode, by the time the episode rolled around to the end, there was no reason whatsoever that they actually had to go through with opening a wormhole to the future. They could have stayed where they were. But they didn't. They said, hey, let's go anyway. We want to go on a trip. And so that's what's happened. Getting into some of the specifics here. Burnham, who has earned the nickname Mikey Spock through various parts of fandom, and hey, I don't like this show. I'm upfront about it. I don't like it. I probably will be watching it this season, but I don't know why, other than a certain level of masochism. And because I've been with this franchise since 1967, and I can't look away anymore. But I tell you, if you're going to watch it, I check BitTorrent. Excuse me, BitTorrent. Excuse me. I don't think it's worth paying for. But we have our Mikey Spock, and she comes out of her wormhole in this super suit that she's got. It's basically like a space suit that's capable of traveling through time, but she pops out and falls out of the sky at a distance that is higher than that of the ISS. If you look at the pictures we get back from the ISS, you're not seeing as much of the curvature of the planet that she does. She is really fallen. I mean, she's got to be at terminal velocity by the time that her suit reboots, and she didn't die. And I knew that it was all going to be downhill from there, so to speak. It was a very large hill that she went down, very large gravity well, and she survived. Some kind of super suit. One of the things I had to I don't go through through all of the plot points like a lot of reviewers do. I don't want to suck up that much time. For my viewers that come for primarily politics, I don't want to eat up all of your time. But you have to ask yourself, why throughout the episode did Mikey Spock keep punching Brooke all the time? Book rather. It wasn't the one time or maybe twice enough to get the point across that she had to keep beating the crap out of him. When she was drugged, I'm sorry, but I just couldn't help myself. She had the same look on her face when she was drugged as maybe a Cheech and Chong movie, after they took just a giant hit of weed or something. And then there was that moment where she was self-introspective and she was talking about unconditionally helping people. What? This is the person who needlessly started a war with the Klingons, and I use the term Klingons loosely because they didn't look like any Klingons we'd seen before, and then had a mutiny. Was that unconditionally helping some billions of people who died in the war that she started? It would have been actually more introspective if she'd said, oh my God, I'm a completely self-absorbed a-hole. That would have been a little better. Frozone, where is my supersuit? Yes. Yeah. Unlike any kind of spacesuit, environmental suit that we'd ever seen before in Star Trek, and certainly for not that era of the 2250s, there is no way that you would be able to fall out of space, go through endless amounts of atmosphere. She said something about heat shields. What? and then hit the ground at the speed that she did without just splattering all over the landscape. She should have been dead, 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 dead. Hey, Star Siege player, nice to see you here tonight. Finishing up, getting to some of the stuff about the Star Trek Discovery, or as I like to call it, STD. People who are fans of this show insist you call it Disco. I'm sorry, this is STD. Because when you watch this show, you might as well be getting an STD, in my opinion. And this is one of the major reasons why I think you get an STD. In particular, this season, they have destroyed the Federation. The Federation, you have to remember, the United Federation of Planets, was Gene Roddenberry's vision of a hopeful future incarnate. The UFP was his vision of a hopeful future incarnate. It was this group of total aliens who could sit down in a council and work things out and work together and be good together. Well, we blew all that up. We said, screw you, Gene. We don't need something like that. We're going to show a dark and dystopian future, which is why Star Trek Discovery and, frankly, anything made by Kurtzman, and to some extent that even includes Lower Decks, everything made by Kurtzman is nihilistic. And this is because Alex Kurtzman is himself a nihilist. He is incapable of understanding or even envisioning a future that is worth looking forward to, that one I want to live in. You know, it used to be that Star Trek, in any incarnation, I could look at that and say, yes, this is a future I want to live in. It's got enlightened people who handle things diplomatically, rather than just resorting to the Vulcan hello, which is the most ridiculous thing they ever had. Excuse me. He's just a nihilist. He's incapable of imagining a better future, and so he does what he needs to do to twist Star Trek into something that it shouldn't be. Star Trek was always intended by design to be an optimistic future. That was the whole point. Back in the 60s when Roddenberry started, that was an era when the Cold War was at its height. It was an era during which, in fact, from my lifetime, my birth up until the 1990s, I lived under constant threat of death by nuclear fire anywhere that I lived. Whether it was in a major metro area, whether it was out where my grandparents' ranch was, because there were nuclear missile silos out there, and so they were targets. Nowhere I ever lived during the Cold War was not under constant threat of death by nuclear fire. And there were other issues going on in there, racism, particularly against African Americans, although also Japanese Americans, because my grandfather, up to his dying day only a few years ago, occasionally, because he'd fought in the Pacific in the Navy, you would occasionally, if he was pissed off, you would occasionally hear him referred to as Japanese as the Japs, because he had a lot of animosity towards them. So for there to be a black female officer and women, another thing, the women's movement was just getting moved on then. You were looking at a future where you could see all of these things had been overcome. They were a non-issue anymore, and we saw that throughout Star Trek. Whatever foibles, we may see on other planets, they were not things that were affecting Earth or the Federation. We had gone beyond that. Well, Alex Kurtzman is a nihilist. He cannot see anything but darkness. He is incapable of imagining a better future. He's incapable of imagining a place where things are much better. Star Trek Picard, another perfect example of this. We were told over and over and over in Star Trek The Next Generation that Earth was essentially a utopia. And why shouldn't it be? You have replication, you have, teleportation. With replication, you shouldn't ever have a single person on Earth who is in any level of poverty, and yet that's what we saw. Because Alex Kurtzman is a nihilist who cannot imagine a future that is that optimistic. And so he turns Star Trek into nihilism. When you do that, you no longer have Star Trek anymore. The thing that makes Star Trek unique in all other science fiction is its optimism. The show that has taken over that now is The Orville. And I love The Orville. I'm really hoping they get a 4th season. And I understand they're having a hard time getting Seth MacFarlane to sign on for a 4th season. I hope there's a 4th season. I'm waiting with bated breath for the 3rd season. But that is the show that's taken over because it shows an optimistic future. I'm sure some people definitely have some of the same foibles that we do. But in general, it is optimistic. And you can see it. It's wonderful. Jeanette says, hi, Bill and all. Hi, Jeanette. The new episode is on tonight, do you think? For STD, I caught it. It dropped last night sometime on CBS All Access, and I caught it midday or sometime today. I don't remember. Enough time to do these kind of notes for it. Starseeds Player says, it looks like they're trying to do Andromeda. Yes, which was really a storyline that Roddenberry envisioned for Kirk, but then realized it didn't work for Chris Star Trek was. That's not exactly true. Gene Roddenberry's Andromeda, which, yes, this is absolutely ripping that off, at least as a premise. Gene Roddenberry's Andromeda actually started with a pilot that he did in the 1970s that didn't sell, called Genesis 2. And you can see it. If you watch Genesis 2, you can see why it didn't sell. But if you watch Genesis 2, you're going to see the same general concept. A man named Dylan Hunt, from our time, not from the future, who is put to sleep for several hundred years and wakes up to a post-apocalyptic future that they're trying to rebuild from. If you watch it, you're going to see character names and stuff like that drop that are very similar to what you saw on Andromeda, but they're not the same. Andromeda's execution of that is much, much better, at least till the last couple of seasons or so. I haven't watched it all. I've just bits and pieces, and then I caught like the 4th or 5th season, and I'm like, what? Is this the same show? But no, that wasn't something that was intended for Star Trek. That was a totally different thing. And then that didn't sell, so he made a second pilot called Planet Earth that recast some of the major characters. But again, you see the same thing. The main character's name is Dylan Hunt. He is a guy who was frozen in time and brought back to life several hundred years later. And Harper Smythe is a character name. That's where it originally came from. It's just that they took it many decades later and said, this doesn't work. We can go, this general idea and flesh it out completely differently and have it work a lot better. So that's really what it was. It came from that failed pilot. Bill says, you watched the first 2 seasons of STD, not interested in season 3. Neither am I. I felt like I had to give this episode a watch. I can't look away from the damn train wreck. I don't know that I'll review them every week, but I can't look away from that train wreck. I'm glad you're able to distance yourself, because I can't. It sucks. It just sucks. One of the interesting things about this was the whole time travel thing. Okay. In prior incarnations of Star Trek, we've actually seen some very, very extremely advanced time travel that occurred not long before this era, and it's supposedly been outlawed and all destroyed. Well, unfortunately for that hack fraud, no talent hack fraud, Alex Kurtzman, who's behind all this, we know from prior Star Trek that a ship can travel centuries back in time or forward under its own power, as long as it's large enough, fast enough, and shield enough. The most famous one of these was Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, in which our heroes take a stolen Klingon ship back to get humpback whales in approximately 1985. So they went back a couple of hundred years and then came back forward a couple of hundred years. And it happened, let me think now, 3 times in Star Trek, the original series. Twice accidentally, I'm sorry. Once that involved the cold start of the warp engines and they went backwards in time a bit. And one where they accidentally tried to pull away from the gravitational field of a black hole, and that screwed them all up. And in that same episode, they did it intentionally by doing what's called a slingshot effect around the sun. And they used that again in another episode called Assignment Earth. We didn't see the special effects like we did in the other ones, but it was done again. All you need, guys, is a ship that can slingshot around a sun at sufficient velocity, warp 8 or so. But Alex Kurtzman hasn't watched any of that and doesn't care, as he continues to show that he doesn't give a rat's ass about any Star Trek that came before, except when maybe he needs to pull a character from another series out so that they can be brought in for fan service, or because nobody wants to watch the crap he's got without some of the other characters that we know and love in it. And then he proceeds to ruin the characters that we know and love. I have a viewer, I don't know if she's still watching, but I have a viewer who is very, very upset with his treatment of 7 of 9 in Star Trek Picard. Just very upset. When she was growing up, 7 of 9 was a role model for her to some extent. She really liked the dynamic between her and Janeway in Star Trek Voyager, and liked the idea at the end of that series where it looked like 7 of 9 was going to go off and live happily ever after with Chakotay. And so to bring her back as a, booze swelling, phaser firing, killing machine, who was now apparently bisexual or a lesbian, we don't know for sure. That really bothered her. That really bothered her a lot, such that she got really very upset. And I was never a big fan of Star Trek Voyager. I think it's a good series. I think it got better when 7 of 9 joined the cast. And for the same reason, because you had this character development that you weren't seeing in a lot of the other characters, because of the nature of who that character was. So I can understand her being very, very upset. I continue to say, and Marshall said it too, this is not Star Trek. This is some other show with the words Star Trek mistakenly duct taped to the film cans. Let's see. Starseeds player Kurtzman, continuity is for suckers. Yeah, he's said on the red carpet at various times, you can't keep track of all Star Trek continuity. Dude, I'm here to tell you, you can. You just have to know what it is. And you don't know, so you don't give a crap. There is a complete disconnect between this and any of the Star Trek from 1966 to 2005, which, near as I can tell, he hasn't ever watched. So, Hedrick is saying, cage match, Kurtzman versus Berman. Unfortunately, due to Berman's age, I think he might have a problem with that. Excuse me. I think he might have a problem with that due to his age. The problem with Star Trek, and the reason it kind of disappeared in 2005 was under Berman, it had gotten into a very formulaic A-B plot structure. There would be the A plot, which was just generally something technobabble. You'd start the episode with this technobabble thing happen to the ship and it's bad. Then you'd have some type of character development. But the character development was not having anything to do with the whatever technobabble thing was going on. So you'd have the character development and things would happen, totally unrelated to this thing over here. And in the last 5 minutes of the episode, the technobabble thing would be fixed, and somewhere along the way, the character development would come out. That's a bad way to structure things dramatically. Okay, so you have a technobabble, bad thing happen. You have character development that has something to do with this technobabble thing that they're trying to fix. And as a result of going through and doing these things, the character learns something about themselves that allows them to maybe contribute to fixing the technobabble thing. But for Voyager, and also until the 4th season of Star Trek Enterprise, fell into this very, very unfortunately predictable A-B plot structure. And that tended to lose fans. It lost me. I had lost me by about the 2nd or 3rd season. I've now watched them all, and the 4th season's much better. If they'd been doing that since season 1, they probably would have gone on at least 5 years, maybe more. So, Larry says it's a platform for political agenda. Yeah, that's the other thing about it too. That's the reason that Burnham has earned the nickname with many YouTubers as Mikey Spock. I don't remember exactly who came up with that. It may have been Doomcock. I don't remember. Another YouTuber. I don't remember who came up with it, but it's kind of accurate for the way that we've seen this character before up to this point. But yes, people say, oh, well, Star Trek's always been political. And that's true. That's true. Even from the 60s, Star Trek has always been kind of political. But what they did was they would show you an allegory. Here comes the Enterprise. We're going to this planet where they have this problem that's kind of like what we actually have right now. But it's usually a little more nuanced. It isn't coming at you and bashing you over the head and say, this is what you have to think. This is the only right answer. This is what you must think. There were often places that were very gray areas. I don't remember the name of the episode, but there's a great example of this in a Star Trek The Next Generation episode, where they have these two civilizations. They've got representatives of each of them on the ship. And it turns out that one of them is heavily, heavily addicted, and don't know it, to a drug that's created by the other one. And so the moral ambiguity on this comes in. You're going, well, clearly, these guys over here, they're just freaking drug dealers. But you have the Prime Directive that says, well, we can't interfere with this. And that's where you get this moral gray area. You have something is horrible going on, but you have the rules that say, well, we can't deal with that. But by the end of the episode, what happens is, well, Picard is put in a position where he says, okay, well, we can help out these drug dealers over here, and at the same time keep these guys addicted. We can say, no, the Prime Directive is in effect here. We're not going to help either of you. And that leaves the drug-addicted people without their drug, which means that they're going to go through withdrawal. Things are going to be horrible for a while, but then it's going to get better. And so, but you didn't come out and say, okay, this is bad, we're going to get into it. They didn't bash you over the head with it. They found a clever way to get out of it. But at the same time, you got the idea that these guys over here sucked. But again, not bashing you over the head. This is what we must do. If we find drug-addicted, drug dealers over here, we just kill them. Star Trek under Kurtzman has been nothing but bashing you over the head with some kind of message that is absolutely guaranteed to turn off at least 50% of a possible audience. Because they're not going to agree with those politics. The Klingons in season 1 were supposed to be Trump supporters. What? I mean, it was so badly off the mark that I was like, these are supposed to be Trump supporters? I mean, they said so. They said they were supposed to be Trump supporters. And it was so far off the mark that I'm like, I don't even think Trump supporters can see themselves in this. But probably the woke probably did see Trump supporters in that. And that's my general thing on Star Trek under Kurtzman. I finally figured out that the target market for Star Trek under Kurtzman is not science fiction fans particularly. It's certainly not Star Trek fans like myself. I've been around this thing for over 50 years. It is the woke, because when you get into conversations with them on social media, and I have from time to time, they argue just like the woke. They're totally intractable. They will call you names. I had one of them go off on a multi-tweet rant one time about how I'm a fascist because I happen to like the original series over the rest of them. Well, the original series was my first show. What do you expect? But apparently now original series and original cast movies are fascist movies, and I'm a fascist for liking them. Now, I didn't engage that person because in that case, they happened to share the video that triggered them. So I figured, good. There's no such thing as bad publicity. Even if you're going on a rant, somebody who's one of your followers is going to click that video and take a look at it, to see, oh, yes, I agree. What a complete a-hole Bill Stone is, So I'm okay with me. But occasionally on social media, totally just clinically and as an experiment, I have thrown out of context, I'm talking to, you're just some leftist. Bingo! That will instantly trigger all kinds of insults about how I'm a racist, homophobic, sexist, fascist, Trump lover. Every single time. No, without fail. Try it sometime yourself. Get a rabid supporter of Kurt's Trek and throw out, you're a leftist, and just see what happens. Don't have to even mean it. Just see what happens. The target demographic for Star Trek under Alex Kurtzman is the woke, and the rest of us can go screw ourselves as far as he's concerned. Now, I think it's backfiring amazingly. The ratings for Star Trek Discovery on CBS. Are they miserable? And I think that's probably indicative of them all. I have this sneaking suspicion that what's actually happening is CBS All Access, soon to be Paramount Plus, because Paramount's now back under their wing. soon to be Paramount Plus, probably has really bad viewing numbers. The problem is that they have bet the farm on Star Trek. I mean, think about it. What other shows on CBS All Access does anybody care about? Is there anything? Can you name any other show on there? Because I can't. They bet the farm on Star Trek, and so they cannot be showing Star Trek as failing, because if they do, their whole freaking service fails right along with it. So I think the reason that they don't publish what their viewing numbers are is because it would have the effect of killing their service. I have a suspicion that there probably are no more than a couple of million viewers, maybe less, on their subscription service. Supercruise63 says, how many people have seen the whole first season of Stargirl? Just watch it again, just as fun as the first time. I haven't yet. It's on my to-do list. There's just a bunch of stuff happening with me in the background. It's why I'm only basically doing live streams and taking things out as clips from time to time, because of other things I have going on in my life that kind of eat up my time. And I just don't have the time anymore to sit down and watch a lot of movies and TV. I make some exceptions for stuff that I want to review, but that's about all. At the end of a review, we have to ask ourselves, is it any good? Well, it's not bad science fiction, but it's terrible Star Trek. It is another science fiction program with the words Star Trek mistakenly duct taped to the sides of the film cans. So, other things to talk about tonight. Back to some of the more serious things. We're going to talk about some emails from and to some unspecified individuals. The reason I'm not talking about who these individuals are is because for the last 24 or so hours, Facebook and Twitter have been on an extensive campaign to scrub any mention of these things on there. I think Bill and I may have been able to get away with doing a link to a New York Post article. I haven't looked to see if mine's still up, but they have been actively trying to pull that stuff down. Now, the thing is, if you are refusing to believe that this stuff is true, or at least credible, then you are mentally ill. The same as I mentioned in last week's live stream, and I have that linked to in my description box. You're mentally ill. You're unwilling to look at objective reality, because that's what these are. I get what happened here. I totally get what happened here with these. Somebody, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was Hunter Biden, dropped off a laptop at a computer place to be repaired. Never picked it up, never picked it up, never picked it up. Well, I've been involved in that sort of thing before. When somebody dumps off a computer and never picks it up, well, okay, it's mine now. You know, if you try to get a hold of them and they don't get back, and after a couple of weeks, well, okay, I guess it's mine. So well, you might refurb it. But what this guy did, what the particular business did, the tech did, they took a look at the hard drive, and I do that myself, mostly out of some morbid curiosity, but also to see if there's something in there, you know, that maybe, hey, wait a minute, this person would really want to have, maybe I should get a hold of them. And what do they find? Apparently tens of thousands of emails going back and forth between unspecified individuals that would make a certain individual who might or might not be running for president look really, really, really corrupt. Looking back at my chat here, just using an expression, yeah, Marshall says, people who suppress that which fear, find what is hidden, and you know their weakness. Yes. Okay. The thing about this is, it actually bothers me, is that one way or another, whether it's, you know, certain parts of the press saying, oh, this isn't real, and social media saying, oh, we don't let things on that have to do with hacked things. Well, this wasn't hacked. This wasn't hacked. This information was gotten totally legitimately and handed over to the FBI. But the guys running this business do exactly what I would have done. They made an image backup of it. That's what I would have done. Not only would I have done that, given the contents, I would have used, because you discover after a while that 40 years in IT is a pathway to abilities that some might consider unnatural. there would be copies of this, if at all possible, on routers all over Asia, because I have experimentally at different times, because I was tracking down, I totally accidentally came across a Chinese botnet that was going into routers, these really badly configured routers, and taking them over. And I learned how to take them over. I never did take them over, but I learned what was going on, how the Chinese were doing it. If you look, I could find access to hundreds of these things. And that stuff would be out there everywhere I could put it. Any place that I could put it where nobody would be able to find it. Because, at some level you have to wonder if this guy's life isn't in danger. Anyway, he did turn the thing over to various press outlets. The problem is that it's now filtered with press outlets. Whether it's one on the left that wants to say, no, this is totally wrong, it's nothing, just go away, forget about reality. Or on the right, where they're, going to frame the worst of it. And the worst of it looks real bad, but it's still filtering through the press. Supercruise63 says, I can believe they are. They're following the leftist agenda and only promote free speech when it fits their agenda. Most that they don't agree with. They block or they ban. Yeah. Twitter went not quite down today for a couple of 3 hours. And maybe I'm just being paranoid, but I have to wonder if the reason that it went down was because they weren't interjecting new parts of the algorithm to go out and find this stuff and yank it off. That's entirely possible. I don't know for sure. I'd be curious to see what Twitter has to say about their particular outage, but I wouldn't be surprised. Excuse me. So, I'd like to speak directly because I don't know where this came from. I don't know who has this or where it came from. But I'm telling you, my friend, we need a torrent of this. A bit torrent of this. We need this out there in total, in full, unredacted, sitting out there where anyone can get it, and on a medium that makes it virtually impossible to remove. We need a torrent. Now, if you can't make one, it's possible you can't, I don't know. But if you can't make one, I can. Send me the files. I will figure out a way that we can arrange to do it securely so that neither of us is compromised and no one will ever be the wiser. And I will be happy to make a torrent out of it because it's something that should be seen unfiltered by anyone who has the ability to pull it down. And with BitTorrent, that is anybody. You'd only need to seed it. I bet you'd only need to seed it for a couple of hours tops before it became a very, very healthy torrent on its own, and whomever started the seed could just drop right off and never be seen again. And you can get into things like starting the seeds from virtual machines that sit inside Amazon Web Services, self-deleting computers so that once you've got a certain level of seeding going on, the VMs just delete themselves and there are no footprints left. Get me these files, guys, all of them, and I will put them into a torrent and everyone will be able to see them unredacted and completely free of any media bias on any side. And that's another thing, you put it out on the internet like that for hundreds of millions, if not billions of eyes to see, and you'll find people picking up things that others might miss. Or you might see references to certain things that I wouldn't know what is, but someone else might, and say, hey, wait, this email says this email says that. Oh, good night, Bill. Sorry to see you go, but yeah. So having a torrent of that would be great. It would be great to have a torrent. Send it to me. We'll figure out, contact me, dude. Whoever has this, I assume that you've made multiple copies. You didn't just make one. I assume you made multiples. We can figure out a way to get together in a way that's totally secure and in a way that no one will ever know the wiser as to who put that torrent out there, because it needs to be seen in its entirety, free of any press filters, because it scrolls across the lower third of every single one of my shows. Nothing you see in the press is real. Nothing. And even if that's right-wing press who are putting this out there in a way that you think is accurate, well, I'm sure they're picking and choosing some too. You need to have this out there in a way that anybody can see it, that everybody can look at it in its full context. Now, I will tell you that we have known for some time that this whole thing with these unspecified individuals and an unspecified country, that country, well, I guess I'll just mention in general, Ukraine has had a lot of corruption. Corruption is practically their middle name. They've been trying under their current president to get rid of some of it, but it is damn near ingrained in everything that happens, both in public and private life. Bribery, things that you do in order to make, businesses kowtow to whatever some other interest wants, not even particularly unusual. There is a ton of corruption in Ukraine. It's just well known. So it's been out there for quite some time. There has been a trail out there for quite some time that leads back to not only these particular individuals, these nameless individuals, but also other individuals like whoever was the previous ambassador to Ukraine before Trump kicked this individual out. Probably higher up in the government. I mean, one of these individuals bragged publicly, you can find it, that they had ordered a prosecutor who was going to do something with regards to another individual whom will remain nameless, and they were going to get about $1 billion from the United States. And when he said, okay, we can have the $1 billion, but you have to fire this prosecutor. And they said, we don't want to do that. You're not the president. You can't tell us to do that. And they said, call the president. And sure enough, within just a few hours, that prosecutor was gone. Now, I wish I could find the YouTube channel, because there used to be a really great YouTube channel. It may be down now. I cannot find it. But every couple of weeks, they would have whomever is the current prosecutor investigating general corruption in Ukraine. They would have him on, and in his native language would spend an hour and a half, 2 hours, just going through all of the things that they were finding. And then the next day, it would usually come out subtitled or, with a translator. Long videos. And the people who are going nameless in this particular set of emails are, and have been for some time, named as conspirators in that country. Named in lawsuits in those countries. What was actually happening, and there was meddling in the United States election by Ukraine, more than there was in Russia. What actually happened was the Democrats were totally behind all of it. A lot of high-level Democrats knew exactly what was going on over there. And they turned it around. They said, we cannot be seen to be, having, because it would, if people really knew this full story, not just this stuff about emails, but if they knew the full story, and I can't explain it to you. It is so complex. I've thought about how to explain it on my show several times. I can't figure out a way to do it. I would be boring and I would lose you. But if you look at the entire story, if people knew, it would be the end of the Democratic Party as we know it. It would cause their complete end. Now, as it is, yes, former mayor of New York got a copy. Yes, he did. He got a copy. FBI got a copy. I know that. As I understand, a copy resided with the same company that had the MacBook in their possession and took possession of it legally after a certain period of time. Again, I hope the people that did that made multiple copies and squirreled them away everywhere they could find, so that regardless of who decided to destroy them, there would still be something out there. But again, guys, if you don't know how to do a torrent, get with me. I'll figure out a way so that nobody traces it back to anybody. It'll just go out there and then disappear. And all of the other people who are seeding, and I'm sure there would be thousands, that would be a torrent, I imagine, that would become very self-sustaining within just a couple of hours. Just a couple of hours. But the fact, by the way, that I can't really discuss the details of this, and again, getting back just real quick, the Democratic Party is hideously corrupt. It is, at this point, way more corrupt than anything Nixon did. Way more corrupt. If the real truth were known about all of the chains of people involved in this, the Democratic Party would be over. As it is, I cannot any longer think of any good reason to vote for Joe Biden. I can't think of any good reason to vote for him. If you can think of a good reason to vote for him after all of this, then you are one of those people that I talked about last week on my stream who are mentally ill. You are deciding that you're not going to believe your own eyes. You are not going to believe objective reality. You are going to go on with your belief system regardless of what reality looks like. Well, there's no hope. There's no hope for you. You're just mentally ill, and there's nothing you can do about it. But anybody else, swing voters, people on the right, there's no reason at all to vote for Biden at this point. He's a demonstrable racist. He appears to have at least some level of, the beginning of senile dementia. I only, and I don't wish this on him at all. I have a lot of sympathy because of people in my family who have had that problem. And it doesn't get better, it only gets worse. There's no way for senile dementia and Alzheimer's to get better. It only ever gets worse. And it's painful for everybody. I don't wish it on him. But I don't think that someone who is running for president that clearly has some level of senile dementia should be elected on that basis alone. Even if you hate Trump's guts, if you know anything about what's going on with the details of all of this, you should have no reason whatsoever to vote for Trump. None at all. At this point, if enough people, find out about at least even just this part of what is a much more gigantic mess with that country, why would you vote for him? If the message gets out about how bad this is, I can't. If you're a swing voter, I hope this would swing you. There's no reason to vote for Biden anymore. No reason whatsoever. And I can never talk about Biden without re-mentioning what Bombard's body language calls power touching that he does. And there's a video out there where she goes through and does body language stuff, and it is so painful. Because she goes through when Biden was swearing in new senators, and this one little 12 or 13-year-old girl, what he does to her is just borderline sexual assault. If anyone but him had done it, it would have been, at the very least, he'd have gotten a punch in the face. It was horrifying to watch. It was really horrifying to watch. He'll do that to any woman at all. It doesn't matter who. He'll do it to him. You can stop him pretty quickly. Bombard's body language also showed that, but you can stop him. It's painful. Just painful. There's no reason to vote for him. There's just no reason for vote for him. In any case, the fact that I cannot discuss the details of this stuff happening between unnamed individuals is precisely why we need alternative social media. I strongly recommend, as in place of Twitter, you use Parler.com. Now, people are calling it Parler.com. Same thing. They actually mean parlay. Parler is a French word for speak. So they're calling it Parler because it's an American bastardization of the actual name. It's Parler, but Parler.com. You can find me there. I am at SYL Ranch there. Please feel free to follow me. I follow everyone back who follows me. There is, unfortunately, no really good alternative for Facebook at the moment. MeWe maybe continues to look like it's got some potential, but it's kind of been looking like that for a long time. It certainly doesn't have the user base that Facebook has, and I'm not sure it's growing fast enough. They're now offering you to do a pro version where you pay. I'm not sure how much that's going to fly, but there's really no good alternative. There is no also good one-to-one feature alternative for YouTube. Maybe Twitch, Facebook, oddly enough. But as long, again, as your content is meeting up to their censorship standards, I'm not sure how well I'd fly there. But there's really no good Facebook one. And Marshall, we've talked offline about, doing something a little bit different. What's happening now with social media, they are absolutely interfering with elections. They are doing active election interference on behalf of the Democrat against the Republican. No question about it. In my mind, it is active interference. I'll be your first beta tester, Marshall, if you want to get around to coding that thing, because God knows we need it. We need it. You're not going to get any relief from government out of this. Star Siege Player says, I like MeWe, but it does seem to be a bit slow on the pickup. Yeah. Dalton asks, do you really need a Facebook alternative? Well, I tell you, for me, yeah, kind of. It's not so much that I need it, in terms of the way that a lot of people use it. A lot of people use it just narcissistically. You have to be something of a narcissist to put out in public constant photos of yourselves, your kids, and by the way, I got a relative who does this. Don't put your kids' pictures out there. Just don't. The internet never forgets, and you don't want to have pictures of your kids out there, because there are also things I can't talk about on YouTube. I did a review of an infamous Netflix streaming film that's out there right now. They got a lot of flack, and in the middle of the stream where I was reviewing it and saying very bad things about the subject matter that it deals with, YouTube cut me off midstream and then deleted whatever had been recorded before that. And I was saying bad things about that. So you just never know. They have very, very good algorithms that look for things that are being talked about in progress, and they did not want that particular thing said, and I don't know why. But in terms of Facebook alternative, I don't use it the way that most people do. I do share some stuff personally on it, but primarily what I use it for is to market my show. There are things on there. I have a page, facebook.com/Tales SYL Ranch. And if you go there, you'll see me posting things from time to time, sometimes political, sometimes having to do with Star Trek. And it's good because, in terms of marketing, because I post things to that page. Then I take it and I cross-post it as my own personal user to either my own newsfeed or to groups that might be interested in what I have to say and stuff like that. And because it is me personally sharing something that looks like it's coming from somewhere else, it's just me sharing things. It's more likely that it gets moved around. I've had that happen. People don't realize that I've created some video or another, and I'll get some immediate negative feedback, and I don't care about that. You can't do a YouTube channel for very long and to care about negative feedback. I mean, if I get positive types of, you could do it better if you were doing this. Marshall knows all about this. Constructive criticism I'm totally open to. But when you get into, just plain saying nasty things about it, I don't care. I just don't care. Occasionally, I'll have come back and said, well, I wanted to do it differently in this video, but I couldn't for various technical reasons. So I say, oh, I didn't know that was you. I'm sorry I said what I said. And I'm like, hey, it's no problem, man. I don't care. If I cared, I would have put it under my own name. But that's how I market. I go from my page out to the kind of the rest of the world via my own personal identity. I need it so that I can market. I need it so that I can have some level of engagement. And engagement is important when you're doing a YouTube channel. It's just part of marketing yourself, unfortunately. Things that I've learned the hard way over the last 3 or 4 years. And sometimes with outside help. Thank you, Marshall Presnell. It's I don't know where I was going with it, but in terms of a Facebook alternative, yeah, we actually do need one. We need one that's like Parler.com, that is explicitly not doing any censorship at all. I think maybe they're doing a little bit. I don't think they let some of those people who were what I believe was the target demographic of that film that I can't mention, or violence or that sort of thing. But they're very much not censoring, things like these emails back and forth between individuals who I dare not name because I don't know what YouTube will do to me. And Marshall is saying Fido-NG next generation. Yeah. Let me explain what that is. Both Marshall and who was in here before, Bill Hedrick, and I know each other from a pre-internet international forum, a series of forums that were run on a protocol called FidoNet. Now, this was pre-internet. The internet was there, but it was pre the internet becoming big and commercialized. And it used dial-up bulletin board systems where individual bulletin board systems all around the world would be, constantly talking to each other. They'd call each other up, grab new, posts from particular forums that they liked, and then they would be available to those bulletin board systems users. It was a totally different type of protocol than we see today. But Marshall and I have talked offline about some type of social media replacement that would have that kind of as an underlying sort of format. I'm not a coder, so I have no way to write this. The most I've done in my experience in my 40 years was a lot of shell scripts, which is radically different from really writing a program. Shell script is a program in many cases, but it's radically different. The ones that I wrote were mostly, as a systems administrator, if I did anything more than once, I would want to automate it. So I would write these shell scripts that would automate out doing certain things so that if I got asked to do something more than once, I just type on my keyboard 5 words and enter, and it would run off and do its thing. But I am not a coder. I have just enough coding experience in my background to be able to teach various programming languages at a very beginning level. Intro to Visual Basic, intro to Python, intro to C. I could teach those sorts of classes, but get beyond that, you just about lost me. The toughest one I ever did was intro to C++. Barely understood that one because it's based around some concepts that were just sort of taking off when I was even getting my degree. And so I've never coded in it to speak of in terms of using those types of concepts. So, I'm not a coder, but Marshall sure is. Starseas Player says the C word. Yes, the C word and the P word was what YouTube decided they didn't want me talking about, even though I was saying very negative things about both of them. And they deserved to be in. Dalton says, I just meant, do you really need multiple social media platforms? I get using them to market, but for personal use, it just seems redundant. Yeah, in a lot of ways, it kind of is. It would be nice if there was sort of a unified platform. Fido-NG might do it, but it would be nice if there was one unified platform that was what we call open source, which means that anybody can take a look at the source code and contribute to it, make it better, things like that. It's the way the Linux operating system has been built since forever, and it's a lot of programs that run under Linux are open source. So that means that if you got 500,000 programmers out there and they see that there's a bug, they can just walk through all of the code and go, oh, here's where the bug is. and either fix it themselves and submit it to wherever they keep this code, or point it out to whomever is the developer and say, line 367, you have a thing here that's causing a bug. And so having something like that, if it was a unified platform, would be very, very nice indeed. At present, that just doesn't exist. As I say, Parler is becoming a bigger platform. It has the most likely possible chance of replacing Twitter, but Twitter and Facebook are utterly toxic. They are practicing censorship. They're experts who are talking about who run things whether they're true or not. Are just grabbing things that that, like these unspecified emails going to unspecified individuals, and they'll pull that stuff down and say it's not true. Guess what, guys? It sure as hell looks true. Again, please get me all of it. I want to make a torrent out of it and let everybody see what it looks like, unfiltered. Marshall says the key to making it work is that you, the user, have total control of what's been published and use what you see in your own feeds. Yeah, exactly, and that's the difference. That's the difference. What we've talked about, Marshall is actually it's Marshall. I've just said that's a damn good idea. I'll be your first beta tester. But the stuff that Marshall's talked about, that's the concept. You personally are the platform. It's not some big company with 5 bajillion servers who can then say, I don't want this talked about on my platform. It's you doing it, and you saying, here's what I'm going to share, here's how I'm going to share it. Whether it's media, whether it's video, whether it's text, posts, pictures, whatever, you have total control over it, and no one else has any control over it whatsoever. So we need that platform. Marshall? Feel free. Tell any of your friends. Feel free. We clearly need it now. These platforms are doing direct election interference. There is no question about it anymore. These platforms, the big ones, Facebook, Twitter, Google, YouTube, Alphabet in general, all of them are engaged now in what can only be called absolutely election interference. They are interfering with the election of the president. They need to all be taken down, every single last one of them. The thing is, you cannot rely on government to do it. And here's why. Back when there was this, I don't know if anybody remembers, I do because of how I got involved, but there was a big deal with Equifax, one of those companies that keeps your credit ratings. They had done an exceptionally stupid thing technically that exposed a whole bunch of their users to the outside world. It was such a stupid thing, and so many things were exposed, that if it had been me as a regulator, I would have said, okay, you have two choices. You either take all of these customers and reset their credit rating to a median level, regardless of where it was before. You get to my credit rating, it's in the toilet, has been since I was divorced. Well, kick mine up to a median level because we can no longer trust any of this data, or you're gone, out of business. They didn't do that, and the problem with it was that the people who were on the oversight committee were lawyers, because that's what most of them in government are. They are lawyers. They're not technical people. They are lawyers. They don't know much about technology, and what they do know is extremely superficial. You can't have them. They were sitting there treating this whole thing as a legal matter. Well, it wasn't. It was a technical matter. It was a question of getting to what had they done that was so fantastically stupid, and then finding the actual people who did it. As it was, they went and they made a couple of low-level flunkies the scapegoats for it and fired them. But those low-level flunkies were not the ones who were responsible for it. They just maintained their systems. The actual way that this happens in a company that size is you have what's called a change control team. And I've been on some of these. What it usually means is that you have some people from various types of the IT department. You might have people from operations. You might have people from development. You might have people from systems administration, network administration. You get into a big company, there's a lot of things to take into account. And at any given time, one or more of those groups may want to make some changes. But what if the change they want to make is going to conflict with someone else's change? Or what if they want to make the change at the same time as the other person and it won't work well to make those changes? So a change control team goes through all this stuff. That thing that they did should never have made it past the change control. It should never have made it. They should have at the very least, the people who knew it was being stupid, should have had somebody, I think in this case it would be the network side, somebody on a network team saying, we've got to fix this. And we got to fix it right away, and taking it to change control and said, hey, we've got to fix this. Not in 2 weeks. We got to fix it right now. This is an emergency change. Didn't. Went straight past that change control and stayed with it and was stupid. Was it injection SQL forms on their website? No, it was not. It was much stupider than that. It was unsecured FTP. They had put a bunch of their customer files on a server that could be hacked from the outside world. FTP, file transfer protocol, is extremely vulnerable. And nobody uses it anymore. We have switched over, when we're doing it, to something called SFTP, Secure File Transfer, or SCP. I prefer SCP, but they're kind of the same thing in a way. But in any case, we've switched. We've changed out of that. We changed out of that at least. I don't remember the last time I even administered an FTP server. Prior to the year 2000. That's how old that was. And that's how stupid it was to keep that open. Nope, I am not kidding. It was an open FTP server. But here's the thing, and this is why you cannot rely on government to do this for you, to provide any alternatives or to have any meaningful hearings, because I'm now seeing on social media where senators and congressmen are saying, do we need to have an emergency oversight meeting of our social media? Not if you're going to do it the way that you've always been doing it. Yeah, you were using SFTP in the 90s, Starseeds player. Yeah, I don't even remember. I don't remember the last time I administered an FTP server. I don't remember. It was prior to 2000. I know that. SSH, SCP, SFTP, they all came along, and we went, oh yeah, we want to replace these things out. But no, Equifax was still running an FTP server. But here's the problem. You take this before one of these oversight committees, you have these guys come in, and I have watched them lie their asses off, the witnesses, and because these guys are all attorneys, they don't know that they're being lied to. They don't know enough about IT to be able to ask the right questions even. Marshall says, in my company, even the most junior developer had the authority to shut down access if the company is at risk. Yes, we'll pick up the pieces later and deal with the clients later. Yeah. There should be, like I say, in most companies, large companies, there's a change control system. It involves paperwork. It involves scheduling. It involves meeting with other departments. And where you're dealing with it, Marshall, yeah, absolutely. It should be possible for those poor schmucks who are maintaining that FTP server and I'm sure they knew, they're not stupid. They knew that it shouldn't have been doing this. I bet you if you look back at the records, there would be records of them saying, please, God, we've got to change this. Can we change this yet? Please, can we change this? This is stupid. We need to change this. But you can't rely on government because they don't know the right things to even ask. They're attorneys. They don't know the slightest damned thing about real technology. Not when it comes down to the nitty-gritty. They know how to use their own computers. They know what social media is. They don't know how it operates behind the scenes. They don't know who the key players are. They'll call in Zuckerberg. Well, Zuckerberg, he's CEO of this big company, right? He doesn't know the nitty-gritty of what's going on. He sets some policies, but beyond that, you can't ask him technical questions. Facebook's too big for that. You can't ask real technical questions of Mark Zuckerberg or anybody else in a high-level position like that. They'll come on and they'll just snow your ass, and you won't know they're snowing you. Marshall says, we call it pulling the ripcord. Dangerous, but better than the splat at the end. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So when that Equifax thing was going on, I was getting so pissed off because I could see that they were taking these two sysadmins who had nothing to do with the fact that this was running FTP. They just were the poor schmucks who had to administer the things, and they were making scapegoats out of them. And that really pissed me off because being in the industry and having been at various times somebody like that, and occasionally knowing that companies I was working for were doing something stupid and not being able to change it, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't change it. I was really pissed off that they were taking some of my colleagues and saying, forget that. That's wrong. That's wrong to take those people. But the people who were testifying before these lawyers were able to snow them and say, oh, it was these low-level sysadmins who were doing something dumb. And like, no, I'm sure that those guys were trying to get it changed and just said, well, we got it in, we got it in change control, please. Can we change it now, please? Buzzy101 said, 181 said something. I saw something in there about running for Congress. No. I don't have the temperament. I don't have the ability to constantly say, can I have your money? Because that's what it requires. It's give me the cash. And I would probably, I'm human, and I know that anytime I've seen it, power tends to corrupt, and absolute power tends to corrupt absolutely, as Lord Acton said. And if you start throwing tons of cash at me, you start having women just throwing themselves at my feet all day long, and lobbyists saying you can get every last thing that you would ever want out of life if you just take it from us and then vote for this over here. I'm human. I know what would happen. I would be corrupt just as the rest of them are. My suggestion, however, when I heard this going on, I got with my Senator Joni Ernst, because I was in Iowa at the time, and I requested a meeting. And I had written up very professionally, because I've written a lot of this stuff just a lot of professional documents in my time. I wrote up a very professional document as a PDF that they could look at and take back with them. And I got a couple of her flunkies that met with me. And I said, okay, well, guys, let's be real. I know that your boss doesn't know the slightest thing about IT, not really. And they were like, yeah, kind of. And I said, okay, the takeaway from this big thing is look at my recommendations. And here are my recommendations. And this is what I think they should do. In closed sessions, where they're not both busy trying to have these stupid long speeches and then not giving the witness a chance to give an answer. What you do is you have me, somebody like me, people in my field, write down some initial questions to ask, okay, and give them out. Just initial technical questions, right? Okay, what was happening here? What was happening there? And you call the right people. You don't call Zuckerberg. You call head of networking. You call the VP in charge of IT. You call a VP in charge of the networking department or something like that. Supervisors involved in large groups, maybe even team leads. You call these guys, and they don't even know this stuff exists. So you call in those people who can actually answer these technical questions that we hand to them, and then give them an earpiece. And the earpiece is connected back to me or someone like me, and we will then feed them follow-up questions. We will say, because it's a question of getting to where the problem is, right? Who is really to blame? So you get initial questions that they can ask, and then they're listening to me, and I'm feeding them follow-up questions. I'm saying, okay, you did this stupid thing. Why did you not do this? Or, okay, you did this. Did you do this? Did you do this other thing? Feeding them technical questions they just rattle off without having the slightest idea what's coming out of their faces. But when it comes to the end, then we can say, here is what they did wrong, and here is your witness to blame. Not these poor flunkies. Somewhere up the chain, somebody kept saying, no, we'll get to it eventually, we'll get to it eventually. That's who should take the blame. And again, if it's somebody like Equifax, I would say, screw this. Let's put this company out of business. Either that or say, okay, we're going to take all of our customers who are exposed and we're going to bring their level, their credit rating up to a median level, at least. But I could never run for Congress. I am not a power-mad sociopathic narcissist. Marshall says, power didn't corrupt me, mainly because I am fearful of too much power. I look back at what little I've had. Starcy's Player says, you're going off to bed? Fandai Master, good night, everyone. Enjoyed the stream. Thank you very much. Certainly suggest, probably going to do it another hour or so, but certainly suggest that you watch the next hour on demand, because it'll be out there. So, nice to see you tonight. Have a good evening, or good morning, whatever happens to be in your time zone, or a good day. I have a viewer comes in from Australia sometimes. But I look back just at what little power I've seen. And I mentioned last week, a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, I was once an actor. Are you leaving also, Marshall, or are you just telling Starship's Player goodnight? So, I used to be on what was called the Stagehands Union Extra list. In Lincoln, Nebraska at that time, there really weren't enough people to... stagehands, union stagehands. It was a member of IATSE back then. I don't know if it's still IATSE. But that was the Stagehands Union. And because I was in theater, I got on a list, and because I could do, general stagecraft type of things behind the scenes, as well as being an actor in front of it. I got on their extra list. And that was great because after I'd worked basically 24 hours straight. You get these touring companies, Def Leppard, Van Halen, and others. They would come through town, and I would be. Are you telling Star Siege? Cool. They would come into town, and they would need me for 24 hours straight. So I would go there, and I'd work these concerts. I'd usually be assigned to somebody or other, and be one of their assistants. And I'd work 24 hours straight. After the first 8 hours, you got time and a half. I've forgotten how long after that, you got double time. But you were working so much, you made quite a lot of money in a very short period of time, more than most students could possibly make at a part-time job, even in a period of months. One of the things that I worked was Def Leppard. And I was working with a stagehand who was working with sound. He was a sound stagehand, one of them. There were like a dozen. But I was assigned to this guy to help him out, and basically he tells me what to do. I go do it. He tells me to crawl up to the top of the rafters on this rope that they've got hanging down and drop cables. I was young and stupid, and I didn't fear death, so I would do stuff like that. Crawl up 30 feet in the air on a rope. So I do stuff like that. But the interesting thing about it was the first thing that I saw that was interesting. He had, today it wouldn't be considered anything unusual, but back then, he had a Rolodex. It was a calendar, one of those calendars or paper. And he opens up his calendar, and it's the previous day. He says, yeah, got to change it. And he flips it over, and the entire thing has got nothing but his girlfriend from wherever he came from in nude poses. Again, nothing you'd even, today, I don't even think would be an issue. They just post them to social media or text them to them or whatever. But we were tearing things down that night, early in the morning, actually. We were tearing everything down, and it wasn't that yet. I was standing off stage in the wings, and the concert was finished up. I'll never forget, the house lights go down, so it's dark in the arena, big arena. It's dark in the arena, band goes off the stage. They walked past me, and right next to me was the stage door. They walked past me, out the stage door. I watched them get in a limo as the stage door was closing, and they left. And then the house lights came up. So keep in mind, the band was gone, and on to wait to their jet, before the house lights even came back up. And I remember it was November. And in Nebraska, November is usually rather cold. It gets real bad in December, but it starts to get pretty chilly, below freezing, below the freezing point of water in Nebraska. And I remember hanging around the outside there. Outside the stage door entrance were these three girls. I can't tell their exact age, teenagers or, early 20s, something like that. And they were all hanging around there, these three girls. They're just, hoping to get a glimpse of the band or something, right? Not knowing that the band was completely gone. And the guy I was working with, by that time we were starting to load up trucks and stuff like that. And the guy I was working with, this British guy, I'll never forget, goes over to the girls and watched him do it as I'm loading up the truck. Goes over to the girls and said, "So, would you like to meet the band?" And they're like, "Oh God, yes, we'd like to meet the band, yeah." So he takes them over into into one of the crew buses, and I'm loading stuff up and going back and forth. About 10 minutes later, I'm still loading things, and the girls come stomping out of this thing, and one of them screamed back, "I can't believe that we gave you a BJ and the band isn't even here." That's what just a little power will do. A little power can corrupt you. And more power than that if you're one of these schmucks. There are lobbyists, if you're male, that have all kinds of ladies just waiting to throw at you. If only you will just do this little thing for them in the bill or something. If you'll vote this certain way. They got money, they got women, they got drugs, they got guys, if you're female or if you're gay. It's a cesspool, a complete cesspool at this point. And there is no way that I want anything to do with it, because just seeing that one little thing of power at Def Leppard that one night many years ago, I realized that this was something that would be, if it was happening to me all the time, if I was going constantly from town to town to town to town to town, and women are just saying, yes, we'll do anything, I might be inclined to abuse that power. It would be, at least at that time, I'm old enough that I'm not quite thinking with my dick all the time. But at that time, it would have been a problem. Today, if you're throwing, 20-somethings, attractive women at me, after a while, I'm probably likely to say, yeah, okay, let's go back to my place. Because 55, my weight and looks, how often am I going to get a chance to have sex with some 20-something supermodel type girl, or the money, You're throwing enough money at me, and I'm like, well, geez, that means I can buy this new house and live opulently like many of these Congress people do. It would be hard for me to not succumb. And I think that's what happens. It happens to everybody. I think it takes your average freshman congressman or senator about 6 months, My observation over time is it's about 6 months before they start to succumb to that sort of thing. So you can't look to government to fix this. You can't look to government to fix it. It won't work. Unless they do what I have said, and I'm going to, on this one, I'm going to call my congressmen and my senators and say, here's what you need to do. Don't have these hearings just in a vacuum where you have Zuckerberg show up and lie to you because you don't know enough about what's going on to ask the right questions. I'm probably going to do it again. It's probably going to be completely futile, as it was before. Because these guys are lawyers, they think they know everything, they think they're above people, probably me. But government is going to fix this. Government will not fix this. It is impossible. That will never happen. The only thing that we can have is free speech alternatives. FIDO-NG, for example. It needs to be something where you have complete control and no outside source has any control whatsoever. It would certainly leave itself open to things like objectionable or potentially obscene or even illegal material being distributed. But to be honest, for the most part, I think that's a small price to pay for freedom of speech. I think that is a small price to pay. Having movies like that C Word that appeal primarily to people who can be described as the P word, I would rather have that going on than the alternative, which is what we've got, which is large companies saying, you can't talk about this, you can't talk about that. You can only talk about what we want you to talk about. If you try to talk about something else, you'll be shot down. It's why part of the reason that tonight's stream is the Amy Coney Barrett hearings one is because two reasons. This thing with the emails is breaking fast and changing constantly. There's a lot of this coming out. I think it's going to be kind of coming out for the next 2 to 3 weeks leading up to the election, because that's what happens when you run it through some kind of filter like the press. Is Fox, for example, will decide, okay, well, we've got the whole cache of data, but we're going to release this damning part today, this damning part tomorrow, this next damning part. I want to see the whole thing out there as a torrent that anybody can get to. But they're still, they've chosen a side to some extent. So they're not good arbiters. But government's not going to fix it. They can't fix it. It's just impossible. It is impossible for government to fix it. The only thing we can have is something where you have control, even if that means that you're sharing information that you don't want out there. That said, I'm going to bring up something that apparently is controversial. I have some relatives, I've floated this on Facebook, and I have some relatives who rather vehemently disagree with me, largely on religious grounds. And I understand that. But we're at a point now where our CGI is getting so good that it is very shortly, very, very shortly, if not, we're not already there, it's very, very shortly going to come to a point where the pictures that these people that you can describe as the P word float around, and the videos that they float around that are using actual underage individuals, will be replaced completely by CGI. Totally replaced by CGI. At that point, I don't care anymore. I do not care about those people anymore. When you can have, CGI, not real human beings, going through and doing these things that these P-word people like, there's no victim there anymore. It's just these guys who are kind of sick watching stuff that isn't real. I don't care anymore. If you're not trafficking in children, if you're not taking pictures and videos of these children and sharing them around, I don't care anymore. There's no victim here. It's just sickos. But if they're not causing any problems, who cares? And, there's the general feedback I get, the general pushback on this is, well, if you allow them to do that, it's more likely that they're actually going to go out and do something in real life with some of those people. And I don't think that's the case. One of the things that got deleted off of that video where I talked about that stuff happens to be my own lengthy history of watching the porn industry evolve. If people were going to be more inclined to do things, we would see it happening every single day. If you look at the porn that is popular right now, it's completely impossible because most women won't do it. The vast majority of women just go no. I like to think of it, sometimes it scrolls past my lower third too, I don't remember if it is now. Both romantic comedies and porn are actually science fiction because they operate in worlds with totally different rules than the real world. Ladies, if you're looking for life to somewhere along the line be a rom-com, you're going to be completely disappointed. Men, if you're looking around for your women to somehow be doing what porn stars do, you're going to be sorely disappointed. These are both science fiction. They operate in worlds that have totally different rules than ours. And if it was going to cause men to do things that they see in CGI, then we would see that happening already, all the time, with men who watch other things that women will never do. We would see them. There are a lot of videos out there where you have a certain level of simulated rape. You never get any real videos of rape, but simulated. Well, guys who watch that, if they were actually going to go out and rape women, we'd see them going out and raping women. It's like saying marijuana is a gateway drug. Well, it's not actually. Lots and lots of people in college smoke lots and lots of weed, and they don't go on to heroin or anything like that. They just get mellow and eat a lot. But I don't, when you get down to that, when you get down to CGI and no real victim, I don't care what these guys are using for whacking material. There's no victim there anymore. The actual trafficking goes away, and there's no real likelihood that they're going to go out and actually do something. Now, there are a class of P-words who do things to children. I know that because my father worked for a while in a wing of a state mental hospital that dealt with these guys. They're going to be out there regardless. Doesn't matter. I mean, these are the real dangerous ones, the ones that must be committed. And to be honest, from what I could gather from what my father talked about with it, they're untreatable. They're just totally untreatable. They have serious issues that go back to their childhood, and there's no way that they can be treated. The best you can do is put them in a relatively comfortable cage where they're not going to hurt other people. But the average person who is just collecting kitty pee stuff, they're not actually going to go out and do anything. They're just using it for whacking material. And as long as it's CGI, I don't care. It may violate your religious beliefs, but as a libertarian, no victim, no crime, as far as I'm concerned. Will I be going live on November 3rd and 4th? Yes, I will. Yeah, I'll be going live. I don't know exactly when. Sometime in the evening. Depending what happens. I think Trump victory, either side has to win really, really, really decisively. But even then, it's going to be a contested election by both sides. But somebody has to win really, 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 really decisively. And if it's Trump, we're likely going to see an escalation of the violence that we see every night here in the United States somewhere. Particularly the Pacific Northwest, which is sort of the hotbed of it right now. We're going to see more of this, and we're going to see a lot of it if Trump wins. Even if he wins decisively, we're going to see a lot of it. If he doesn't win decisively, I think we're going to see a bunch of it. In any case, I think there's every possibility that it'll be contested. If Trump wins, the Democrats will contest it. I'm not sure on what basis. If he wins decidedly soundly, I don't know on what basis they will necessarily contest it. You couldn't have them contesting it on the basis of, say, mail-in voting can easily made fraudulent, which is true. But I'm sure they'd figure something else out. So I'll be on. I'm not sure exactly when. At some point after, a number of states, their returns have started to come in, and I'll probably talk about that somewhat, and I'll be watching the police scanners and things like that. But yeah, I'll be doing that on election night, as much as it pains me. Let's see. Yeah, Marshall says, seeing that we won't know the outcome for several days, if not weeks later, why bother? The reason that I'd bother is mostly because I want to see what the reaction is. I am not expecting anything good to come of it, and I want to be around to talk about the immediate reaction if one happens. So I don't know. I'll do it. I'm just dumb enough to do it. I'll probably do it. I'll probably do it a long one. I don't know how long. I haven't decided yet when I'll go on, but I assume I'll be on there past midnight my time. Yeah, Dalton says chemical castration works for some of those guys. Yes. Well, yes and no. I mean, you can do things that will make it impossible for them to complete whatever act they're going to do. But in terms of their minds are, by the time you're an adult and you have this, your mind is, it's like I said last week, if you're mentally ill, the longer you go on, the more your way you think changes. It literally changes how you think. So if you are one of those P-word guys and you're like 30 years old, it's ingrained forever. You're never going to change that. And hell, most of them don't even feel like they have a problem. You know, if you listen to them talk, and there are some on YouTube, amazingly, if you listen to them talk, they're just like, I don't understand why people don't accept us. It's just another lifestyle choice. What's the problem? There's no problem here. They don't think they even have a problem. So on that level, they're not treatable. You can certainly help, in terms of maybe making them stop and things with, castration chemicals that will, inhibit the level of testosterone in their blood and things like that. But mentally, they can't really be cured. And the best you can do is give them a comfortable cage to live out the rest of their lives. So that's where I'm standing with most of the stuff I'm going to talk about tonight. I mentioned, too, I think that the reason that this thing is focused on, says Amy Coney Barrett on my thumbnail and video description, is I don't know if I could get away with putting something in there that's about some of the bigger stuff, with the emails and whatnot going back and forth between unspecified individuals, nor the ongoing investigation from a country that has named both of some individuals that shall remain nameless as actual co-conspirators in an ongoing probe for their own internal probe for their own internal corruption. Not stuff really having to do with the outside world, but their internal one. That's why I've got his here to some extent, is because I don't know what YouTube would do if I had some of that other stuff in the description, or if I had a different lower third, or if I had a different thumbnail. The other reason is because of the way that both Facebook and YouTube cache this stuff. When I made this stuff on Wednesday, it was, because that's what I do. I usually wait until the day before, maybe 2 days before. And I really wasn't sure what I was going to talk about for sure. But I knew I wanted to talk about the Amy Coney Barrett pointless exercise in futility. And so I made that as my thumbnail and my name. So once you share that to to Facebook or Twitter, it goes out, it grabs a copy of, what the name of the video is and the description to some extent, and it takes the thumbnail and it puts those into any post that you make. If you then later change things inside of YouTube, well, the cached portion remains on both Twitter and Facebook. So if you try to remarket it, it's going to look exactly the same. The best I can do is change, I usually have my marketing copy that says on tap this week. You can change that as part of your marketing copy, and you can change it in the description. But even so, it still comes back all cached. So that's another thing. It'd be useful to have something that didn't do that, didn't do the caching. I understand why they do it. It's easier to go out and grab something once and then just next time it comes up, refer back to the same thing over and over again. So, but it is now 11:13 p.m. my time. I guess I could talk a little bit about updates on Civil War II. There isn't a hell of a lot else specifically to speak about. There is, as always, ongoing violence. There was someone murdered in Denver very recently during one of these things. It still continues. It is still worrying. It is still happening everywhere, somewhere in the U.S. It's probably becoming a little less palatable when you get up to my part of the world, where it's starting to get kind of cold. Right now, outside it is, where's my weather? Outside right now it is 40 degrees Fahrenheit, which is certainly adequate to go out and, riot, loot, commit theft, robbery, armed robbery, assault with a deadly weapon, and the murder of innocents. It's still cool and it's still warm enough to do that. Come November, it's going to be a little more difficult. It isn't something you can't deal with, especially when you got a crowd of people and if you wear the right, clothes. Get into December, you start getting into, sub-zero temperatures and wind chills that can take you down to, minus 10. That's Fahrenheit. That's not at all uncommon during our winters. And you can get a bunch of snow. We're kind of expecting a little bit of both this year. This part of the country very closely follows the solar cycle. The sun has traditionally had I believe it's an 11-year cycle where it will go from putting out a lot of energy to halfway through not putting out very much energy at all, and then backing right around. And we can see this all the time. The sun has been in an extended what they call minimum. The last one of these was called the Maunder minimum. It caused a fair amount of hardship in Europe. Around that same time was when Washington crossed the Delaware. There were rivers that freeze over that do not freeze over today. We're in something that's starting to look like that. And if that's the case, it's going to be colder around here in general, just cooler. And we certainly had a very, very mildest summer. It's not unusual to have many days when it's well in excess of 100 degrees, and because we have a lot of foliage in this city, oh man, the humidity just makes it horrifying. But we had a mild summer. It is being a cooler September and October. I would expect this December to be pretty cold and a lot of snow. That may slow them down, but they've made it pretty clear. There's another part of it is James O'Keefe, Project Veritas, now has undercover footage of, I've forgotten who it is. I believe they're in Colorado. A candidate for office in Colorado who said outright that they're going to start burning things down. He said, I'll do whatever it takes to get elected, and after that, well, we're either going to have socialism or I'm going to start burning the place down, me and my followers. So that's out there. Could get worse. Marshall says, rioter threw a burning plank into a police car in Seattle with a cop in the car. And you think it was the car. I certainly hope so. Dalton, you're on your way back from South Dakota right now. 22-hour drive. Is it always so windy? Yeah, it kind of is. South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, most of the upper Great Plains. There isn't much foliage except in the cities where people have planted it. So, I always used to say in South Dakota, our nearest windbreak is the Black Hills, which is on the far western side of South Dakota. Everything else, the wind just comes in, and it's real windy. There's just nothing to stop it. It comes in off the Rockies, and it just blows straight through. Even Chicago, when I lived there, they called Chicago the Windy City. And you do get some wind, particularly down in the area of the Loop, near Lake Michigan. But even then, it's not nearly as bad as it can get, out on the prairie here. It's generally very windy. Where are you headed from South Dakota? Just out of curiosity. I'm in Lincoln, Nebraska, borders South Dakota on the north. Lincoln is a good 3 hours south of South Nebraska. I think 3 hours or so south of South Dakota. You're practically on my doorstep at this point. I mean, when you consider the entirety of the United States, practically on my doorstep. So. But, those are most of the things that I had to say tonight. Biggest thing I have to take away from this is don't trust government to ever fix anything that's going on with anything technical. It's just, you're headed outside of Atlanta. A lot of warm up there by the time you get down there, that's for sure. If you're going through South Dakota right now, it's probably a good 5 to 10 degrees cooler. Weird thing about this whole part of the country. I've lived as far east as Chicago, as far west as Rapid City, South Dakota, as far north as well north of the Missouri River. Missouri River bisects South Dakota, but I've lived, far enough north of there, of where most of it is, and a bit south of here, and it's weird. This whole band of the country that I've lived in, each state has their own saying, and it always goes something like this. What's the best thing, if you're in Iowa, what's the best thing to come out of Nebraska? It's I-80 East. And every place that I've lived has the same saying. If you don't like the weather here, wait 5 minutes, it'll change. You get too much farther north, and it just cools down and the winters are horrible. You get much farther south, like Kansas City, and the foliage greens right up. It's warm, and you don't get anything like the cold that we get here. This band of the country, you can vary. I've had it happen more than once. 50 degrees in a 24-hour period. I mean, I've had it go from 20 to 70, in a 24-hour period. That's not at all unusual. All this band of the country, wait 5 minutes, it'll change. It is really hard. Oh, you passed by Lincoln a while ago. Well, nice to have you pass by. That's what most people do. Always talk about our infection vectors for that virus. That's the reason. People don't stop except to get gas. They just pass by. So, yeah. If you're getting towards Omaha, that'll be interesting because that is our largest metro area. Weird thing is you can't see a lot of it from I-80 or 680. More on I-80, but less than you'd think because this is a natural prairie. But nobody who lives here wants to have a prairie and never has. So every place is planted trees, and there's a lot of foliage in Omaha. So much so that if you don't know it's there, if you don't get off of the interstate and start driving around, it's hard to even notice that the city is there. But there is a million people in that metro area. It's the same thing with Des Moines. Des Moines is close to, I'm not sure, 400,000 or so, I think, if you include the towns that have butted up against it and become suburbs. But it also has lots and lots of foliage, and it's a little different in Iowa. They get a lot more rain. So you'll see natural foliage as well. So when you drive through there, you don't necessarily notice that there's actually a lot of city floating around there. So it's a weird part of the country. Natural prairie for the most part, but nobody who settled here ever wanted to have a natural prairie in their front door. They always grew lots of trees. In my front yard right now, we've got one gigantic tree that is such that you can't really grow grass in half of the front yard. Big oak tree. And then in the backyard, we've got two that are in the process of dying, one that fell over. So killed part of the fence. By the way, here's an interesting thing I ran into. Totally off this topic, but a scam that I ran into that I was actually a little impressed by. A tree came down, smashed over a chain link fence that we've got. And the fence posts are now unusable. They're bent, but they're also stuck in the ground 3 feet deep by concrete. And I ain't pulling that out, so we're going to call a fence, specialist to come, somebody who does fencing to come and do it. Well, I went to a website. I was just looking at Googled Lincoln, Nebraska fence. It all just says you were in South Dakota for 5 days. Loved it. I'm definitely going to move there. Oh, your wife is the only thing stopping me. Well, as time goes by and circumstances change, I think I'm going to be in Wall, South Dakota. South Dakota and rural stuff in general, because of the time that I spent on my grandparents' ranch growing up, is kind of in my blood. I'm the last of my family members where it's kind of in my blood. Wall is probably where I want to live, because outside of the 3 or so months of tourist season, it's just a tiny, sleepy little town. There's not much, there. It just turns into a giant tourist trap during tourist season. But aside from that, that's right at the edge of the Badlands, probably where I'll settle down and live out the remainder of my life, more or less, as time goes on and other things happen. We're looking for these guys to do some work for us to, fix this fence. So I just Google. Actually, I go to DuckDuckGo.com, because they also are not interfering with what search terms you bring back. Always say use DuckDuckGo.com and not Google, because Google will censor stuff. They will put certain things at the top of the page because they get paid money to do so. DuckDuckGo.com is totally independent of that, and you'll just get searches back. So I got one back that was for Master Fencing in Lincoln. And the company is Fence Company LincolnNE.com, right? That's their website. And you go there, and they have what looks like a professional website. There's a place to supposedly get, I can't really put this up, but, get custom pricing. It has their business hours. It has zip codes that they service. It has cities that they service. Some city facts, service offerings. Looks very, very professional. And I thought, okay, this looks like a good one, so I called them. First sign of trouble was I didn't get a human being immediately. I got something that said, press 1 to continue. That was just all. Picked up, press 1 to continue. That's weird, so I pressed 1 to continue. Got a human being. I said what I wanted to do, and she said, okay, well, let me put you in touch with our contractors here, and we'll set something up. So they send me off to somebody else, and I immediately knew I was dealing with a scammer. They sent me off to what was obviously an Indian call center. I have heard and seen them a million times. It's an Indian call center, someone with a thick Indian accent, and you could hear call center noises in the background, and they were asking me questions and wanting my credit card number. And at that point, I'm like, no, I'm sorry, you're a scam, and hung up on them. Then I called the company I originally called back, because I thought, well, these guys look like they're legit. Maybe they've just gotten hooked into some scammer and don't know it. So I called them back. I said, hey, I want to tell you something. I think you guys have hooked up with a scammer, because they give a local address and everything. And so I thought, you guys maybe hook up with something wrong here. Is there somebody I should tell about this? They said, yes, absolutely. We want you to talk to our customer service department. They sent me to the customer service department, and I've forgotten the name of the company. It's one of those big national, chain things, right? I've forgotten the name of it. But they actually sent me to a real business's support. So they knew to send me to a real business's support line to make this complaint. And the support guys would, oh, yeah, absolutely, that was a scam. We never asked for your credit card number. I'm like, dude, just slow down. I mean, IT for 40 years, I've dealt with these idiots all the time. I just want you to know that these guys, here's their website, here's their phone number, are first sending people off to a scammer, but if questioned on it, they are sending me to you, a legitimate business. And they were like, that's new one on us. And I had to go up a couple of levels. I reached a manager and explained the whole thing, and they went, oh, man. And there's probably nothing they can do about it. This site looks totally professional. I'm sure it's run by people out of India in real life. And so there's probably nothing they can do about it. But it was a new scam. That one was a new one on me. I've done a lot of scams. I've been working with a lot of scammers that can, pick them off almost instantly. But that one was a new one. I thought that was very interesting. Dalton says, maybe we can grab a beer together in this future then. Yeah, well, absolutely. Be happy to, when I'm streaming out of where I think I might be streaming out of Wall. That's certainly a possibility. There is a motel there that does cabins, and they recently been put up for sale. If I had the money, I'd buy them right now. I love their cabins. I stay there any time that I can. And they're not, those wood cabins or anything. That I think at some point they must have been like military housing, like officers' quarters or something like that. But a lot of those are for rent most of the time, as long as it's not tourist season. Probably someplace like that is where I'll end up, where it doesn't cost very much to live, and I can live on what I'm getting from my SSDI and any potential money I might get as an inheritance. But that's all down the road a piece, and I don't know how far down the road it is. So, but let's see, we're at 11:30. Boy, mostly I have said what I'm going to say for tonight. I don't have a hell of a lot else to talk about, other than, all of these Senate hearings, a complete waste of your time. Don't even bother. I can't think of any Senate hearing of any kind, any time in my recent past, that wasn't just a bunch of posturing idiots making speeches that might or might not have anything to do with the subject at hand. And if there's a question in there somewhere, they're not giving the witness any time to make any kind of statement about it. Occasionally, it's happened lately, I've seen it with the Democrats. They'll go through the whole spiel and see what they're supposed to do is give them 5 minutes. They ask their question at the beginning, and during those 5 minutes, the witness answers. But they use up the whole 5 minutes to make a speech, usually where it's denigrating the witness at some point. And occasionally, if you've got a Republican who's chair of a committee, they will say, I'm going to give this witness a chance to answer your question outside of the bounds of the 5 minutes. Most of the time, God, it's just one thing after another. And sometimes you get incredibly stupid questions. AOC, or Red Cortez, as I refer to her on this show, she was talking about climate change or something or other in one of these things where she was talking about how my part of the country, it was a couple of years ago, because we get these floods. We get them about every 10 years. It's just normal. Every 10 years or so, you get a ton of rain, and it floods out the Missouri River from, practically the border of South Dakota all the way down to Kansas City. And it floods it out, and it can be really bad. And we get it about every 10 years. You can find pictures of this. I've got one back in, I think, 1804, or 1904, I'm sorry. And I get pictures about every 10 years. And she was busy harping on with somebody or other about how we had lost everything and it would never come back ever. I just wanted to go up and slap her across the face and say, you twit, you didn't even know the last time we had this one about 10 years ago. We always recover. It's just normal. You have insurance for this sort of thing, and the water recedes. You may have a really crappy couple of years because of it, but the water recedes for another 10 years, And most people don't know this, but the Missouri River has been its path has been heavily changed by the Army Corps of Engineers over the years, where the Missouri River meets the Big Sioux River at the if you look at South Dakota, it's basically a rectangle with this little hangy down point. That's where the Missouri and the Big Sioux Rivers converge, and that's the southeastern corner of South Dakota. The Missouri River used to just twist and turn like crazy, and that would cause floods all the time. So the Army Corps of Engineers has gone in there and straightened the thing out. And in fact, to this day, South Dakota and Nebraska, people who are right on that border, have fights from time to time about who owns the land. Because the border's traditionally been this winding river, but then the Corps of Engineers straightened it out, and so now land that was once in bordered with South Dakota are now Nebraska, and vice versa. So they still have court battles over stuff like that, but the Army Corps of Engineers straightening that out has helped quite a lot in terms of flooding that we get. Dalton says, I wish they weren't even airing the hearings so the senators didn't get airtime to preach their agenda. Yeah. I am firmly now of the opinion that when you get into things like this, they should not be televised. I know that the public wants to see it, but At this point, it's just nothing but all kinds of posturing and endless speeches where the witness has no chance to answer the question, and the speeches are just there because the various senators and congressmen are talking to their constituents. They're saying, they're like, you're going to overturn Roe v. Wade, and I know it, and blah, 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 blah. Your time is up. No chance to respond. I know you're going to get rid of Obamacare because blah, 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 blah. No chance. And on the other side, I really hope you're going to get rid of Obamacare because blah, 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 blah. And no chance to reply. Just constant. And, this time, I'm telling you, man, Kamala Harris is not as unlikable as Hillary Clinton. But when I saw her asking questions, my initial impulse was to punch her in the face. Had I not been watching it on a handheld, my phone, where punching it doesn't really hurt anything, if I'd been watching on my big 40-inch that's in front of me here, I'd been like, because she was just absolutely irritating. She's, like I say, she's not as bad as Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton I can't listen to without it sounding like fingernails on a blackboard. And she has no charisma. Hillary Clinton lacks anything resembling charisma, which is part of the reason Trump beat her. But, God, Kamala Harris, she was so stupid. And she's doing it all via Skype, or whatever they're using. I don't know what they're using, but she's basically Skyping. And, when you have that, there's a delay. You hear, it's just lag between what somebody says. You're hearing it with me now. I have about a 5-second lag. I say something here, it actually shows up out there in about 5 seconds. So you got this lag. And so not only was she posturing and giving all these things, even when she'd ask a question, there would be this lag, and the witness would start to answer, and then she'd just start in again, as if the witness hadn't answered. She just ignored the fact that there was this lag. It was just infuriating. I wanted to slap her across the face. But at this point, big takeaway from this show tonight. If you are going to vote for Biden, there is no reason. There's absolutely no reason that I can think of to vote for Biden at this point. The man is corrupt. These emails between unspecified individuals are very damning, if you've been paying attention like I have, to the ongoing corruption internal to that nation, internal, not external, internal corruption investigations in that unspecified nation. You discover that there are unspecified individuals who are named conspirators. Multiple unspecified individuals who are named conspirators. And then you have Biden, who is not all there, and that will not get better, it'll only get worse. And what do you got left? There's no reason, and the guy's touchy-feely with young girls. He's not a pedophile, but he's touchy-feely in a really, really difficult to watch way. So why would you vote for this man? What rational reason would you have to vote for this man? If you're going to vote for somebody else, if you can't bring yourself to vote for Trump, vote for Jo Jorgensen of the Libertarian Party. I am not going to vote for her because my feeling is that said it before, but the Democratic Party at this point has gone so far left that they are actually enemies of civilization itself. Were their various schemes implemented, it would kill billions. The Green New Deal alone would kill billions. So we cannot have them in power. They are too far off the deep end. So for me, I'm saying to myself, well, I remember Ross Perot, and I don't want Biden to get into power because there was a split vote of some kind. So if you're thinking about voting for Biden and you just can't bring yourself to vote for Trump, vote for Jo Jorgensen. Now, she ain't going to win. Libertarians never win at the federal level. That's not happening. What you can do by voting for Joe Jorgensen is to say, I am voting this way because it's saying to my party, my Democratic Party, that you have gone too far left. I can't vote for your people. I'm going to vote for somebody else because I want to make a statement that next time around, I want to have somebody that's freaking electable. Get somebody like Tulsi Gabbard. That would be a good candidate for them in 2024. Tulsi Gabbard. That would be a perfect candidate for the Democrats. Of course, she was totally excluded this time around because the Democratic Party has moved far to the left, and she is more a centrist. So, of course, when your entire party has become a bunch of socialists, she's going to look like some kind of Republican, when in other years she would just be a centrist. Yes, Orange Man bad. Yeah, I know. That's like I say, if you think Orange Man bad, look at Biden and what he's done and what he is and what he's doing, and say to yourself, can I vote for this guy who is clearly on some level corrupt? And how corrupt is coming out, it's totally fluid. By the time I'm done with this, Tucker Carlson will have released more information. Because he's doing a lot of that. And there are other places. I mean, he got it from the New York Post, which is as right-wing a newspaper as you get. Again, I want to see this stuff come out as a torrent. I want the whole shebang as a torrent. If you're the guy who is running that store and you happen to hear me and you got a copy, let's get together. Just send that email to callin at sylranch.tv. I'll get it. And it's Proton Mail. So that's what my platform for my email is, on purpose, because it's very, very secure, and the company does not look at your email addresses, and it is overseas, so it's hard to shut down. But it uses PGP encryption. Even if you're getting an email that is not via Proton Mail, you're still going to have some encryption on it. And in any case, if you're going to talk to me, use Proton Mail. Just make an account at protonmail.com without paying for anything. I pay so that I can get my sylranch.tv and wrstone.com emails over there. But contact me. We'll figure out a way to get the files in a way that no one will know that the files got there. And we will figure out a way to get those into a torrent that I think within a couple of hours would be so healthy that you could kill the torrents and remove any servers that might have been originally seeding them, and in such a way that you would never know that they were there in the first place. Yay, Amazon Web Services. You can do that sort of thing with AWS. AWS is very cool that way. Well, I guess it's about 20 till. I'm not seeing a whole lot going on in chat, so I'll probably let it go for the night. Again, don't watch these stupid things. If you know this guy who has the hard drive or copies or images, let me know. I want to get a torrent out there so that this is not being, drop leaked, maybe out of context, maybe spun one way or the other by one side or the other. I just want the data. I want all the data for everyone in the world to see with no filter. Let them all come to their own conclusions. That's my general thing. So, I guess that is all that I have to say about that. I would love to keep the conversation going. So please leave your comments, questions, nasty remarks. I'll do my best to get back to you. So thanks for watching. That's all the time that we had today for this episode of Tales from SYL Ranch, where everyone is entitled to my opinion. And I'm Bill Stone.
Ultimate power in this world has always been one simple thing: the control and manipulation of minds.